Chapter 2286. In the past, Ling Han hadn't done too many tests on the first scroll and gradually forgot about it. Now that he had it again, he couldn't hold back his curiosity anymore. He stabbed with the divine demon sword, and when the tip of the sword touched the scroll, a shocking light shone, causing his hand to go numb, and the divine demon sword almost flew out of his hand. He was shocked. This scroll was really a bit fierce, even matching the sharpness of a celestial tool. He scratched his head. How could he open the scroll? He was too curious. Ling Han thought for a long time, and still put the two scrolls away. If he didn't touch them, they were no different from ordinary paper, and he couldn't feel anything special at all. I'll think about it later. Right now, I'll modify the heaven-deceiving technique. He entered the Black Tower, and comprehended under the reincarnation tree. The women had already done so, but the price was a large amount of star stones. In any case, they had a lot of star stones, so they didn't have to worry about running out in a short time. After spending millions of years under the reincarnation tree, Ling Han finally succeeded in modifying the heaven-deceiving technique. Of course, he had the help of the magic cube of origin. Otherwise, he couldn't have reached such a height in regulations. He passed the modified heaven-deceiving technique to the women. After they cultivated it, they might not be able to bully celestial kings, but they should have no problem bullying ascending origin tiers. The women continued to cultivate, and Ling Han returned to the town. Fairy Yun he had already waited for him for many days, but she wasn't here now, and had longed to wait there. "Greetings, milord." When it was Ling Han's turn, Long Tu immediately bowed respectfully. He knew that Ling Han was a monarch tier, and he had to be respectful to such an existence. When it was a foreigner bowing to him with a respectful expression, Ling Han felt an indescribable strangeness, but his expression didn't change. He nodded slightly and said, "Your master has broken through to the 5-leaf stage." Long Tu immediately straightened his back. 5-leaf. From now on he had advanced into the ranks of monarch tiers, and was destined to become an ancestral king. Following such a master was naturally glorious. Ling Han smiled. They were just monarch tiers, and he had killed who knew how many. He had even killed several emperor stars. He asked, "Where is your master?" "My family's fairy has been waiting for many days. Please follow me," Lanta said respectfully once again. In a small forest outside the town, a luxurious carriage stopped by the side of the road. Around the carriage were a dozen or so people sipping tea and discussing the Tao. Fairy Yun he was like the moon surrounded by the stars, receiving everyone's flattery. She, on the other hand, was all smiles and appeared to be at ease. These people were all angels, all of them handsome men and beautiful women, a type of visual enjoyment. "Fairy, isn't that person a little too ostentatious? He actually made Fairy wait for so many days," someone said unhappily. "That's right. Just what kind of person is our Fairy Yunhee? You shouldn't have. Even if the fairy is kind and unwilling to speak, we still have to seek justice for the fairy." Everyone started talking at once, trying their best to belittle Ling Han. Of course they were jealous, because they knew that if they were late for so many days, Fairy Yun he would definitely not wait for them. Fairy Yun he only smiled faintly, an expression of pride on her face. Now that she had advanced into the 5th severance, it was the time when she was the most high-spirited. She thought that the gap between her and Ling Han had already infinitely narrowed, and had even surpassed him. Yes, Di Fei had indeed died at Ling Han's hands, but 5th severance monarch tiers also had differences in strength. Now, she only felt that she was incredibly strong, and completely possessed strength like Ling Han's. From the 4th severance to the 5th severance was equivalent to going from the 4th severance to the dividing soul tier. This step was naturally astonishing, and it was no wonder that she felt so good about herself. She really wanted to spar with Ling Han now. Right at this moment, they saw Lan to lead a person over. What, a demon? Everyone showed expressions of hatred and disdain. Which angel tribe did not hate the demon race? The power of darkness and light that both sides cultivated were natural enemies. Being able to barely coexist peacefully was only achieved under the pressure of the heavenly venerables. They had never thought that the person that Fairy Yunhee was patiently waiting for was actually a demon. Fairy Yunhee nodded. He is indeed from the demon race. When she wanted to introduce Ling Han, she suddenly realized that her understanding of Ling Han was practically zero. She didn't even know his name. I forgot to ask for your name, she asked Ling Han. Ling Han's thoughts turned. I am Tyrant. When everyone heard this, they all gritted their teeth. This guy was really shameless, actually calling himself Tyrant. Some names could not be randomly given. For example, you could not casually call yourself Sword King, Sword Emperor, or something like that. Otherwise, there would definitely be people who used swords that would come to challenge you. The name Tyrant was even more ridiculed. Anyone who heard it would feel displeased. Tyrant, right? Do you dare to spar? Someone challenged Ling Han. Ling Han cracked a smile. Of course I can, but those who have fought with me will mysteriously call me father. Everyone was dumbfounded at first, and then came to a realization. They had been beaten to the point of trembling. Calling him Tyrant, wouldn't that be calling him father? Why was this guy's mouth so sinister, taking advantage of others right from the start? Ziqian, stop. Fairy Yunhee hurriedly stopped him. This challenger was only a 4th Severance King tier, and against Ling Han, he was practically a piece of cake. Furthermore, Ling Han even dared to pinch Di Fei to death, so was there anyone that he did not dare to kill? That challenger naturally would not submit. How could he cower in front of a goddess? He humphed and said, Don't worry, Fairy. I will not go too far. Xiao, he did not wait for Fairy Yunhee to say anything, and had already leaped out. Everyone only felt a blur before their eyes, and then they saw that the challenger's neck had been gripped by Ling Han. Ling Han released a slight killing intent from his body, and instantly caused that challenger to tremble all over. He said in a trembling voice, Tyrant, 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 Tyrant. In everyone's ears, he was indeed calling him father. This person was really too despicable, actually giving such a name. Fairy Yunhee stood out and said, Brother Tyrant, I will battle with you. Ling Han's interest waned. He had even defeated a 7 Lotus 3-leaf King tier, so how could he have any interest in battling a 6 Lotus Monarch tier? He merely yawned and casually tossed that challenger to the side, saying, Fine, I'll exchange a few moves with you. Everyone was very angry. Ling Han was clearly also in the Severing Mundane tier, and actually dared to speak so boldly. He was really too arrogant. Fairy Yunhee stared at Ling Han, preparing to make a move, but as her eyes stared at Ling Han, a strange coldness grew in her heart, causing her to actually not dare to make a move. She only felt that if she moved, she would suffer a direct blow from Ling Han and die a beautiful woman. This was the intuition that she had gained after advancing into the 5th Severance, and she was very confident in this intuition. According to the old man, this was a warning of danger, and she definitely could not be careless. To encourage herself, she drew out another sword. It was completely dark blue, and shaped like a crystal. There were ancient seals engraved on its surface. This is the Jade Moon Tide Birth Sword. The precious tool that has been passed down through the generations of Fairy Yunhee's clan. No, this must be a secondary sword. Otherwise, why would Fairy Yunhee bring it out? Even if it's a secondary sword, it should still be incredibly powerful, right? Why hasn't Fairy Yunhee made a move yet? Everyone was surprised. Fairy Yunhee seemed to have become stupid. She only maintained her posture, but did not make a move all this time. Chapter 2288. If these people were shouting slogans like, Long live the foreign realm, or Invincible in the foreign realm, Ling Han would not be the slightest bit surprised, but, for survival, was something that Ling Han could not understand. Could it be that there was some big lie in the foreign territory, that it wasn't the celestial region that was being invaded by them, but the celestial region was invading the foreign territory? Ling Han sat quietly. It was better for him to listen quietly now. Do you know what kind of danger we are facing now? The 9 Lotus Powerhouse asked, his tone very heavy. Yes, everyone shouted loudly. The 9 Lotus Powerhouse nodded. The Xian'an plane is attacking us. Their plane level is higher than ours. There are countless powerhouses, and once they attack, we will all be slaughtered, our plane will be devoured by the Xian and I plane, our descendants will all be extinct. From then on, our existence will be completely erased. What's our only hope? He asked loudly. Take down the celestial region, that super low-level plane, kill everyone there, and then let our plane devour that super low-level plane, raise our plane level, and then we can fight against the Xian and I plane or even surpass it. Everyone said almost in unison. This was definitely not the first time they had this kind of conversation. Ling Han listened at the side, already shocked to the point of speechlessness. It turned out that the foreign territory was also in the same situation as the celestial region. They were being invaded by another plane. This plane level was higher and could invade at any time, leading to the extinction of the foreign territory. When the nest is overturned, there are no unharmed eggs. The solution was also very simple, that was to destroy the celestial region, raise their plane level, and then be able to fight against the Xian and I plane, or even counterattack. It turned out that the foreign territory had always been fighting on two sides. One was resisting the invasion of foreign enemies, and the other was invading the celestial region. No wonder the foreign celestial venerables were so active. It turned out to be for the most basic survival. Ling Han shook his head in his heart. The celestial venerables were already above the rules. Then in a different world, how much impact would it have on them? No one knew this. Maybe there was no impact, maybe there was impact, but even he could recultivate the rules of the foreign territory. Why couldn't the celestial venerables? An Empyrean was so strong that even if the foreign realm was destroyed, someone like Empyrean Scarlet Flame could still enter the Xian and I plane and live a carefree life. Immortal Domain's three individuals are extremely calm, not caring about the other side's invasion at all, instead fervently trying to get rid of outsiders. Therefore, there must be something else in between. Unfortunately, such a secret would naturally not be made public. Only a few old fellows and big shots knew about it. A feeling of exhaustion arose in Ling Han's heart. So what if they blocked the foreign domain? Once the foreign domain was breached by the Xian and I plane, it would be the immortal domain's turn next. If even the foreign domain couldn't block it, how could the immortal domain do it? Moreover, the people of the other side had always said that the immortal domain was a super low-grade plane. Since the other side hadn't conquered the immortal domain yet, it probably wasn't that high grade. The Xian and I plane was the same. In that case, once a mid-grade or high-grade plane invaded, how were they going to defend? Just thinking about it was tiring. Wouldn't they have to fight endlessly? Ling Han shuddered. His dispirited feeling quickly disappeared and was replaced by endless fighting spirit. If defeating the foreign domain was the end, wouldn't life be a little too boring? Although Ling Han had never admitted it, he was very clear in his heart that he actually enjoyed this kind of life very much. He was constantly taking risks and making his life rich and colorful. He didn't want to live an eternally monotonous life. Fighting with the heavens, fighting with the earth, fighting with people, it was endless joy. He revealed a smile, his fighting spirit raging. He couldn't wait to immediately kill his way into a higher grade plane and fight. Moreover, the foreign domain is obviously more tolerant of celestial venerables. Whether celestial venerable Qi Yen appeared or attacked, the foreign domain did not target him. Then, in a higher grade plane, would there be existences above the celestial venerables? Ling Han thought in his heart. This was definitely not impossible, but the current facts could support it. Very good. The Nine Lotus powerhouse continued. But to invade the immortal domain, we must be able to adapt to fighting there. First of all, the rules of the two realms are different. We, who are weak, will not be targeted by the immortal domain when we enter the immortal domain. But as long as we reach the celestial king level, we will. So, we will not be able to display the battle strength that we should have in the immortal domain. We must be prepared for this. Otherwise, once we fight, you may die. Everyone should have heard these words many times, but they still nodded solemnly. Once the invasion and war broke out, even if they couldn't become ancestral kings, they would still kill their way into the immortal domain and speed up its destruction, thereby raising the level of their own plane. Today's lesson was to instill a sense of crisis in everyone. The Xian Ni plane was launching a large-scale attack, and they were in imminent danger. Only by conquering the immortal domain could they be saved. Thus, this was an invasion of justice. Ling Han was from the immortal domain, so he naturally couldn't sympathize with the foreign domain. But now, he at least knew the reason why the foreign domain had to invade the immortal domain, and even won everyone's support. They didn't even hesitate to throw themselves into it generation after generation. After a day, Ling Han's consciousness was a little muddled. After the lesson ended, he went to the information room and flipped through the relevant information. He originally thought that the war between the foreign domain and the immortal domain was a secret, just like how very few people in the immortal domain knew that the foreign domain was invading. But here, it was completely different. This was not a secret at all, and instead, it was a powerful motivation for the foreign domain people. Very soon, Ling Han flipped through a large amount of information. The planar war was very cruel. The victory of one side would definitely be the complete destruction of the other side. The entire world would be merged, and the original living beings would be destroyed. Because living beings were like the motivation of the world, if the living beings weren't destroyed to a certain extent, the world couldn't be devoured. So, the first thing the foreign domain did was to kill everyone in the immortal domain. Then, the immortal domain's heaven and earth would become incomparably weak, and then it could be devoured by the foreign domain. At that time, the two worlds would merge into one, and the level would be even higher. This meant that more and more powerful martial artists could be born. Not only was the foreign domain invading the immortal domain, the Shen Ni plane was attacking the foreign domain. In reality, the planar war had always been happening. There was a celestial venerable from the foreign domain who had been to the Shen Ni plane and even further planes. He understood a lot of information. According to him, the sum of all the planes was called the origin world. There were countless of them, and they were divided into 4 grades: top-grade planes, high-grade planes, mid-grade planes, and low-grade planes. The foreign domain and the immortal domain were all low-grade planes. It was just that there were countless low-grade planes, so they could be ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The immortal domain was probably the lowest grade plane, because no new planes had been discovered behind the immortal domain. It was always like this. 2 planes were adjacent to each other, and one was slightly stronger than the other. If one didn't want to be devoured by the stronger plane, then there was only one choice, and that was to devour the weaker plane. Ling Han looked up the information again. The immortal domain had only been born for 130 eras, while the foreign domain had been born for 150 eras. There was still a gap. Chapter 2289. 130 eras was a long time, but in the Yuan world, 130 eras were just child's play. It was said that the time of a top plane's existence was at least hundreds of millions of eras. In comparison, the immortal realm could not even be considered a grandchild. From the birth of a plane to perfection, it took a very long time, so the true flourishing age of martial art in the immortal realm actually only lasted for 20 to 30 eras. Only at this time would it collide with another space, fuse with it, and a connection point would appear. There was no weaker plane appearing on the other side of the immortal realm, which meant that the plane had not yet been born, or was still in the process of being perfected. One day, it would be connected to the immortal realm. The whole Yuan world was like this. Old planes were constantly being devoured, and new planes were being born. One side of the foreign territory was connected to the immortal realm, and there was a connection point, which was the springboard for the foreign territory to invade. On the other side, the foreign territory was connected to the Shen Ni plane, which was the invasion channel of the Shen Ni plane. On the other side, the light race and the holy beasts were responsible for resisting the invasion, and the two sides were at war. Ling Han was shocked. Fortunately, the light race and the dark race were opposing each other, and fortunately, the Shen Ni plane was still attacking the foreign territory. Otherwise, if the celestial lords of the foreign territory attacked together, the immortal realm would have ceased to exist a few eras ago. The planar war has engulfed all the Yuan worlds. No one can escape. Ling Han sighed. This cruel fact made him full of fighting spirit, and at the same time, he was under a lot of pressure. At this time, if there were experts from the higher planes, or even the top planes, would they be able to sweep everything by themselves? Strength, only strength was the way to establish oneself. Ling Han temporarily put aside his curiosity and thoughts about the planar war. Anyway, with his current strength, he would only be reduced to cannon fodder, so he could only work hard to improve himself. He hoped that the foreign territory could hold on for a while, and also hoped that the immortal realm could hold on for a while, until he had enough strength to reverse the world. The martial arts environment of the foreign domain was obviously stronger than that of the celestial domain because everyone understood that if they couldn't conquer the celestial domain, they would one day be conquered by the Xian Ni plane. Hence, everyone placed cultivation as their top priority. This world also reached a flourishing age, the number of immortal medicines far greater than immortal domains. Moreover, all types of heaven and earth treasures were also greater, helping the foreign realm nurture astonishing geniuses and experts. For the sake of attacking the immortal realm and resisting the invasion, the entire foreign realm was mobilized. For example, 100 Battles Academy was one of the countless academies in the foreign realm, established by the ancestral king. They did their best to nurture the younger generation, raising the level of martial art in the entire foreign realm. All living beings were attached to heaven and earth, and the power of all living beings could also be fed back to heaven and earth. If everyone was like a dragon, the power of heaven and earth would be unparalleled, and the suppression effect on invaders would be even greater. Ling Han couldn't help but think of Emperor Feng Qing and the others. They had sealed off the news of the Outlander realm's invasion, pretending that everything was peaceful. This was actually slacking off the initiative of all living beings. It also prevented the power of heaven and earth from being strengthened, so the suppression of the Outlander realm's experts was naturally not strong enough. When he thought about their passive resistance, he was completely sure that these three great figures didn't think about resisting the other side's invasion at all, instead hindering them, wishing for immortal domain to be destroyed sooner. Why didn't the three of them directly make a move? Because heavenly venerables were not tolerated by the heaven and earth, and would be targeted the moment they appeared. If they made a move, they would suffer backlash from the heaven and earth. It was fine to kill one or two people, but if there were too many of them, it was guaranteed that even heavenly venerables wouldn't be able to bear this kind of karma. Ling Han suddenly understood why the ancient realm would be divided into two, and why people from the ancient realm were not allowed to be brought into the celestial realm. That was because if the ancient realm was complete, more people would enter into the celestial realm and attempt to break through to the severing mundane tier, dividing soul tier, and other higher tiers. In this way, the power of heaven and earth would be strengthened, and this was contrary to the wishes of Emperor Feng Qing and the others. Of course, there might be a deeper reason, but Ling Han couldn't think of it. Forget about all this and go cultivate. I have to break through to the dividing soul tier as soon as possible. I'm clearly already a second secret, yet I have to be a fifth severance. This feeling is really unpleasant. Ling Han left the information room and prepared to cultivate properly. Though the 100 Battles Academy had only been established by the 10 Lotus Ancestral Kings, the various facilities in the academy were of the highest quality, such as the Time Cultivation Room, which could accelerate one's cultivation up to 1,000 times. However, it was not easy to enter into this kind of cultivation room. One had to show the highest level of cultivation talent. Though Ling Han was a monarch tier, he still wasn't qualified to enter into this kind of cultivation room. He had to have a better performance. He still hadn't started cultivating, and the Empress, Hun Yo, and Bewitching Maiden Ro had already mastered the heaven-deceiving technique and could truly travel in the foreign realm. Furthermore, Hun Yo and the Empress cultivation level had also returned to the fifth severance, and as for Bewitching Maiden Ro, she had completed the leap from Emperor tier to Monarch tier, also advancing to the fifth severance. This was naturally the wondrous use of the fruits of the 100 Fruits tree. She was very lucky, and only used 3 to complete the breakthrough. Ling Han first left with the 3 women, and then they exited the Black Tower, changing into the appearance of the people of the foreign realm, and then using the modified version of the heaven-deceiving technique to disguise themselves. Then, even if the ancestral kings weren't careful, they probably wouldn't be able to discover their abnormalities. But without exception, the 3 women all chose the appearance of the angel tribe. There was no other reason than it was good. On this point, not to mention the Empress and Bewitching Maiden Ro, Even Hu Niu was no exception. Ling Han was very gloomy. The three women would all stay in the Angel District, and none of them would stay with him. Ling Han, don't be sad, Niu will often come to see you. Hu Niu patted Ling Han's shoulder, looking like she was consoling him. Ling Han could only shake his head and bring the three women back to the academy. The 100 Battles Academy welcomed prodigies with open doors at all times, and since the three women were all monarch tiers, they were naturally accepted. Their arrival also caused a commotion in the Angel District, because there weren't many monarch tiers in the foreign realm, what more when there were three stunning beauties that were as beautiful as goddesses. Ling Han spent close to half a year in the time cultivation chamber, and was called out by someone. It was Fairy Yunhee. "Tyrant, are you interested in joining my team?" this woman asked. Previously, she had once thought of never having any contact with Ling Han again, so as to avoid recalling the scene of her being humiliated by Ling Han, but now there was a necessary reason. Ling Han asked indifferently, "What for?" "I obtained an ancient map from my clan and discovered an incredible place that might bring us great fortune," Fairy Yunhee said. Ling Han thought that if he cultivated on his own, it would probably take at least several tens of thousands of years to return to the second secret, and this was already taking into account the resources given by the academy, but if there were some natural treasures, then the time would be greatly shortened. He naturally hoped that he could return to the second secret as soon as possible. "When do we leave?" he asked. "If Brother Tyrant agrees, I'll go contact a few more people and we can leave in about 10 days, Fairy Yunhee said. Ling Han nodded, and then entered the time cultivation chamber again. Even if there were only 10 days, he didn't want to waste it. Fairy Yunhee couldn't help but be gloomy. This guy was actually so dismissive of her. It couldn't be helped. This stinking bastard of the demon race didn't know how to appreciate her beauty. She comforted herself like this. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 2290. 10 days later, Fairy Yunhee arrived as promised. Ling Han walked out of the academy with her, and after making a detour, they entered a small forest. There were already over a dozen people waiting here, all of them beautiful angels. When the two of them appeared, 3 of the angel race's beauties even winked at him, but they didn't let anyone else notice. They were the Empress, Hu Niu, and bewitching Maiden Ro. Why did these 3 girls also come here? They were monarch tiers, so it wasn't strange that Fairy Yunhee would invite them. What was strange was that these 3 girls actually didn't tell him. Presumably, they wanted to give him a surprise. However, when Fairy Yunhee actually invited a demon, the remaining people were all displeased. What did this mean? Fairy Yunhee, why did you allow a demon to join our group? A man was the first to speak up. He had a head of golden hair, and his skin was soft and supple. His skin was better than most women's. Fairy Yunhee already knew that Ling Han's arrival would cause everyone's displeasure. She smiled faintly and said, "Brother Tyrant's strength is very extraordinary, and will be of great help to our group." "Ha, just an ugly demon," the golden-haired man said disdainfully. The golden-haired man said with disdain, "So what if he's an emperor? We have 7 emperors here." Hearing this, Ling Han felt quite rueful. The 100 Battle Academy was only one of almost 1,000 academies in the foreign realm, but there were as many as 7 monarch tiers here, which the celestial realm couldn't compare to. No wonder for so many years, it was always the foreign realm that invaded the celestial realm, and the celestial realm could only barely defend. Han Feng, be careful with your words. Fairy Yunhee immediately warned. She had seen Ling Han's ruthlessness, and also knew that this person's strength was nature-defying. In front of him, she couldn't even make a move. "Fairy Yunhee, you've been fooled by this brat's boasting, right?" the golden-haired man said with a cold smile. This Fairy Yunhee was a pearl of the angel zone of the 100 Battle Academy. Before Hu Niu and the other 2 girls appeared, she was a unique existence, and who knew how many men coveted her. It was just that Fairy Yunhee had never shown any interest in men, so naturally, no one was able to get close to her. However, now that she was so intimate with a demon, these people were naturally displeased. The golden-haired man was only the first to jump out. Goddess Yunhee furrowed her brows. In truth, she was very displeased with Ling Han. He had messed around with her things and treated her with disdain. If it wasn't for the fact that Ling Han was ridiculously strong and could greatly increase the safety factor of this adventure, she definitely wouldn't have called Ling Han along. Those who are unwilling to fight alongside Brother Tyrant can leave the team immediately. I won't force you, Fairy Yunhee said calmly. Everyone looked at each other, their displeasure growing. They felt that Fairy Yunhee was being too biased towards Ling Han. No matter how they looked at it, they couldn't see how strong this demon was. Brother Tyrant, right? I'd like to ask for some advice, the golden-haired man said. He glanced at Ling Han, the corners of his mouth curling up slightly. Ling Han, on the other hand, said to Goddess Yunhee, "It's fine to kill this idiot, right?" Goddess Yunhee hastily shook her head. Han Feng is the young master of the Gold Sun clan. Please show mercy, Brother Tyrant. All right. Ling Han smiled. When the others heard this, they were naturally even more displeased. Before the fight even started, the two of them were already certain that the golden-haired man would lose. Was this not reasonable? The other party was a five-leaf emperor, after all. Even if there were differences in strength between emperors, it shouldn't be this exaggerated. All right. The golden-haired man's expression was dark. He immediately took out a sword that glowed as though it was transparent. He shook it lightly, and 10 runes immediately appeared on the light sword. A 10 talisman treasure. The others exclaimed. In the foreign domain, the strength of a treasure depended on the number of runes imprinted on it. However, at the level of the 6 lotuses, the upper limit was only 10 runes. However, it was extremely difficult to achieve. The requirements on the materials and the forger were too high. Even if they were not emperors or sovereigns, it was still difficult for them to have a 10 talisman treasure. Normally, they would only have 8 talisman treasures. 9 talisman treasures were extremely rare. The golden-haired man immediately took out a 10 talisman treasure. It was clear that he was extremely furious. He wanted to defeat Ling Han in one go. Come! The golden-haired man was immediately filled with confidence with the treasure in his hand. A 10 talisman treasure and his emperor's might meant that he was invincible. Since you're asking for a beating, I'll fulfill your wish, Ling Han said indifferently. He casually raised his hand and pressed it towards the golden-haired man. You overestimate yourself. The golden-haired man snorted. He swung his sword and slashed at Ling Han. There was a flash of light that was incomparably brilliant. Ling Han did not mind. He continued to press his hand down. Crack! The sword light instantly shattered. Ling Han's hand was like a 5-finger mountain. It immediately pressed the golden-haired man to the ground. His entire body was in the shape of the Chinese character, and his face was facing downwards. Everyone was stunned. The golden-haired man was actually not a match for Ling Han. It had to be known that the golden-haired man had taken out a 10 talisman treasure, which could greatly increase his battle prowess. How could he still not be able to block a single attack from Ling Han? Now, everyone should no longer have any doubts about Brother Tyrant's strength, right? Fairy Yunhee said timely. Although she already knew Ling Han's strength, this scene still caused her heart to ripple. Everyone was speechless. If Ling Han was a member of the angel tribe, then they would definitely be delighted to surround him like stars surrounding the moon. But now, they only felt even more envious of Ling Han. How could such a freak appear in a mere demon tribe? Welcome to the team, Brother Tyrant. A man smiled, but his smile was extremely forced. They looked at each other and had already exchanged their thoughts. That was to isolate Ling Han in the following time and carry out cold violence. Thankfully, although Fairy Yunhee seemed to have fallen for it, there were still 3 girls as beautiful as goddesses in the team. None of them were inferior to Fairy Yunhee. There were plenty of fish in the sea. Let's go. Fairy Yunhee waved her hand. After setting out, she even introduced Ling Han to the others. Ling Han did not care about the others, but when he heard the names of Hu Niu and the others, he could not help but laugh out loud. One was called Niu, one was called Xing, and one was called Ro. How lazy, they all took one of their own names. Seeing Ling Han's smiling expression, Fairy Yunhee immediately warned, Brother Tyrant, don't have any ideas about the 3 of them. Ling Han asked with a smile. Did he need to have any ideas? They were all his wives. They've already been taken, Fairy Yunhee said. Then I'm not allowed to pursue them. Ling Han said with a smile. Fairy Yunhee was instantly angered. She was as beautiful as a goddess, yet you did not notice her as if you were blind, yet set your eyes on Hu Niu and the others. How was she inferior to the three girls? What kind of taste did this demon race scoundrel have? She snorted and said, I might as well tell you. Do you know who Serene Source is? I don't. Ling Han shook his head honestly and rudely. He had been cultivating all these days, so where would he have the time to care about other things? Fairy Yunhee could not help but be speechless. You did not even dare to know who Serene Source was, so how were they supposed to communicate? This is an emperor star, she said solemnly. Chapter 2292. Who would have thought that 3 female monarchs as beautiful as goddesses would be seduced by a demon that was as ugly as a pig? This didn't make sense. Ling Han even winked at Fairy Yunhee, meaning, if you bet, you must pay. You now owe me 3 celestial medicines. The others didn't know, and were instantly so angry that they wanted to gang up on Ling Han. You already have 3 super beauties, and now you want to hit on Fairy Yunhee? As a woman, Fairy Yunhee didn't believe that a female monarch would fall in love at first sight, what more when the other party was a demon, and all 3 of them seduced one person. She came to a realization. You guys already know each other? Ling Han laughed loudly, clapped his hands, and said, not bad, you're really smart. Though she was praised by Ling Han, Fairy Yunhee didn't feel happy at all, because she still lost 3 celestial medicines to Ling Han. No, she was tricked into losing 3 celestial medicines. This guy was purposely setting a trap for her. She was extremely angry, but couldn't help but admire Ling Han's ability. A demon seduced 3 angelic beauties. He was practically a love saint. Everyone was still eating, but all of them were tasteless. 4 top beauties were seduced by Ling Han, which made their hearts ache when they thought about it. However, prodigies were prodigies after all. After eating, they continued on their way, and everyone collected their emotions. Nothing was more important than their own strength. Moreover, Hu Niu and the other 2 girls had already gotten on Yu Yuan and the others. When they returned to the academy, the 3 of them definitely wouldn't stand by and watch as Ling Han had beauties on his left and right, with another backing. On their way, they would sometimes enter areas where the regulations of light were strong, and other times they would enter areas where the regulations of darkness were strong. They would try their best to avoid them and walk in neutral areas. Thankfully, the regulations of darkness that Ling Han cultivated weren't strong in the first place. If he actively dispersed it, neither the regulations of light nor the regulations of darkness would affect him, and Hu Niu and the other 2 girls' attainments were even lower, so the effect would be negligible. Though the 2 can't be cultivated at the same time, they can both be used for reference. Ling Han said in his heart. The world was high and mighty, its power unfathomable, and the rules were the materialization of the world's power. They had traces to follow and reason to follow, and they were no longer ethereal and illusory. Through the darkness and light natural laws, he might be able to see through the secrets of the foreign world's power. Together with the fact that he was previously the ruler of a world, this would be of great help to him, allowing him to transcend the natural laws and directly reach the essence. Why was the heaven and earth core so important? It was because it could allow people to reach things above the laws, allowing them to take a step beyond the laws. 3 months later, they arrived at the foot of a tall mountain. According to the information my family obtained, this might be the ancient tomb of an ancient expert. Fairy Yunhee said. In the end, she was willing to divulge some actual secrets. Previously, she had been tight-lipped. This is a test given to me by my family to see if I can successfully excavate this ancient tomb. She said to the crowd, I hope that everyone can do their best to help me. After the ancient tomb is opened, everyone can choose a treasure. If there is a cultivation technique, everyone can copy it. It's our honor to be able to help Fairy. That's right. Why are you still talking about treasures? It's fine as long as there is a cultivation technique. Everyone spoke very politely. The main reason was that Hu Nyo and the other two girls obviously had no chance, and Fairy Yun he didn't seem to have fallen, so everyone's eyes naturally turned back to her. Then I'll thank everyone first. Fairy Yun he bowed to everyone, and then led them up the mountain. After walking for a while, she would stop, close her eyes, and ponder before moving again. There had to be an incredibly complicated map in her mind. Otherwise, she wouldn't need to walk and stop like this. Ling Han observed carefully, and discovered that there was indeed something special about this place. The mountain rocks were like pillars, each one standing straight. At the beginning, it was nothing, but now that they had walked, he saw that there was actually a dense fog in the surroundings, which seriously affected his vision. This was a formation. Ang! A beast roar rang out, and a snow-white tiger actually walked out from behind a stone pillar. It had a pair of wings, and this was a saint beast. On its forehead, there was a snow-white lotus with 7 petals and 2 leaves. Everyone's expression changed. Though there was no lack of monarch tears among them, 5th Severance was only comparable to Yang Soul. After all, there was a gap of a major tier between them, and now this saint beast was at the Yin Soul tier, enough to match 10 5th Severance monarch tiers. And this was even assuming that this saint beast wasn't some king tier or emperor tier. Otherwise, it could easily defeat them. Set up the formation. Fairy Yun he shouted softly. They had already made preparations long before coming here, so they naturally wouldn't be thrown into confusion just because they had encountered a 7 lotus 2-leaf saint beast. They immediately set up a formation. 7 people formed a group, and they could combine their power, displaying battle prowess that was even stronger than ordinary combined forces. Fairy Yun he took the lead, and immediately charged towards that tiger. Yet Ling Han's eyes narrowed slightly. The appearance of this tiger was too strange. He had a feeling that this wasn't a real tiger, but rather an illusion created by a formation. Boom! Fairy Yun he's attack landed, and that tiger suddenly trembled, vanishing without a trace. Where's that saint beast? Could it have grasped a spatial secret technique and escaped? That's right. How could a 7 lotus 2-leaf saint beast be so easy to kill? They didn't dare to be careless, and they all stood on guard to prevent this saint beast from catching them by surprise. Ling Han smiled and said, "There's no need to be so nervous. This should be an illusory formation. That saint beast can't possibly appear again." Presumptuous. Everyone shook their heads. How did that saint beast look fake? Right at this moment, a white shadow flashed, and another saint beast appeared. This time, it was a snow-white battle wolf with a pair of wings on its back. Only its eyes were golden, and it exuded an awe-inspiring divine might. There were 7 lotus 3-leaf saint beasts on its forehead. Not good. Everyone's expression changed. They could match a 7 lotus 2-leaf saint beast, but a 3-leaf saint beast was too powerful. If they fought it head-on, they would die. Only an idiot would fight it head-on. Retreat first. Fairy Yun he hurriedly said. Everyone retreated, and only Ling Han remained where he was. The white wolf roared, and it pounced at Ling Han. Ling Han stood with his hands on his back, pretending that he didn't see it. The white wolf pounced, but it passed right through Ling Han's body as though it was transparent. It's really an illusion. The others were shocked. Then, they looked at Ling Han with admiration. They really didn't find anything unreal about this wolf at all. Their eyesight was really too poor. Ling Han only smiled. He could tell that the saint beast was fake mostly because of his intuition. He didn't have this intuition in the past. It only appeared after he became the master of the world. This was because the master of the world transcended the rules and could see the essence of the world. Naturally, he wouldn't explain himself. He said to Fairy Yun he, "Come, lead the way." It was one thing to see through the illusion, but it was another to see through the illusory formation. Fairy Yun he nodded. Inwardly, she was thankful that they were lucky. If they did not bring Ling Han along, they would have been tormented by the mirage sacred beasts. They might have even given up on advancing. She compared the map in her mind and began to point the way again. Chapter 2293. This time, no matter what sacred beast appeared, no matter how strong it was, everyone was fearless and advanced bravely. Their efficiency was very high. In just an hour, They had walked out of the maze. A deep and secluded cave appeared in front of them. But everyone immediately frowned, because there was already a group of people at the entrance of the cave. When it was Ling Han's group's turn, that group also came over. There were 9 people in total, 7 men and 2 women, all demons. "Why are you here?" The person on the other side asked first. "Fairy Yun," he said in a low voice, "I should be the one asking you that." "Oh, you must be Fairy Yun he of the Ji Luo clan." A demon walked out of the group. From everyone's expressions, this person should be the leader of this group. Fairy Yun he looked at that person for a while, then said, "Rainstorm Clan's Sword Tiger." "Correct." The demon nodded, his hands behind his back, his aura imposing. Fairy Yun he's expression tightened slightly, and she said to the people beside her in a low voice, "The Rainstorm Clan is a wealthy clan of 9 Lotus, and the Rainstorm Sword Tiger is a well-known figure of the younger generation. He's currently at 9 Ong Academy." 9 Ong Academy? The people of 9 Ong Academy all showed expressions of anger when they heard this. Nearly 1,000,000 years ago, Serene Source had lost to that monster from 9 Ong Academy, causing them to stop at rank 72. Otherwise, 100 Battle Academy's ranking would be even higher. Thus, they naturally had no good feelings towards 9 Ong Academy. "But Fairy Yunhee, why are they here?" Someone asked the key question. They'd used the map to go around like this. How could anyone believe that the Rainstorm Sword Tigers group had come here by accident? Fairy Yunhee frowned slightly and said after a while, "My Ji Luo clan obtained the ancient map from an auction house. Perhaps they sold many maps, and the Rainstorm clan also obtained a copy." Everyone else frowned. Ancient tombs were dangerous, but the greatest source of danger in the world was living things. "Hey, you over there, are you trying to lose all face for us demons? You're actually following a group of angels?" Someone said to Ling Han, his face full of disdain. Indeed, an angel and a demon were enemies. It was already good enough that they didn't fight each other. It was even more inconceivable for them to stay together. Ling Han broke into a grin. "What's your business? Fuck, I'm going to kill you, you scum." Someone jumped out from the other side with a vicious expression. The people on Fairy Yunhee's side were all laughing and hugging their arms, as if this matter had nothing to do with them. First of all, this was an internal strife of the demon race, so it had nothing to do with them. Secondly, Ling Han's strength was too strong. There was no need for them to interfere at all. Even Fairy Yunhee had no intention of stopping him. She only said to the Storm Sword Tiger, "Take care of your people. Otherwise, don't come looking for me if you regret it." The Storm Sword Tiger sneered, thinking that Fairy Yunhee was bluffing. Seeing that the Rainstorm Sword Tiger didn't object, the demon immediately pounced toward Ling Han. His hands pressed down, forming a mountain of swords. Shio shio shio. 10,000 arrows shot out at the same time, wanting to turn Ling Han into a sieve. But Ling Han casually delivered a slap, and that demon was already sent flying. He spun continuously in midair, spitting out a mouthful of broken teeth. "So it's a monarch tier," the Storm Sword Tiger said darkly. The one that had been sent flying just now was a 4th Severance Emperor tier, and the 5th Severance was when a monarch tier suppressed an emperor tier the most, so it wasn't strange for him to be sent flying with a single move. He was even more furious. A mighty monarch tier actually wanted to suck up to Fairy Yunhee. Were you trying to throw the face of the demon race into the gutter? You'll regret it if you say it. Fairy Yunhee added fuel to the fire. This was a competitor, and it was best to drive him away as soon as possible. The Storm Sword Tiger was naturally even more furious. He humphed and said, "Then let me experience it." "Ugly monster, Nyo will beat you up." Hu Nyo jumped out, pointing a finger at the Storm Sword Tiger, her expression filled with pride. "Ugly, ugly monster." The Storm Sword Tiger's expression stiffened. He was a rare handsome man in the demon race, all right? It was just that the race was different, and so the taste was also different. She actually dared to call him an ugly monster. "Woman with a foul mouth, I will not spare you." He pounced out, wanting to teach Hu Nyo a ruthless lesson. Who's afraid of who? Hu Nyo met him fearlessly. Peng, peng, peng. The two of them immediately began to battle, and everyone discovered to their shock that Hunyo actually had the upper hand, and the advantage was not just a little big. This was natural. Hunyo originally had the chance to become an emperor star, but there was too little source power of heaven and earth, and there was only the mark of a ninth heaven celestial king in her body, so she couldn't use it to form 9 divided souls. But she was also one of the best among monarch tiers, and now she had recultivated the regulations of the foreign realm, further increasing her battle prowess. In truth, her true battle prowess was already not inferior to an emperor star. How could this possibly be something that the storm sword tiger could stand against? The little girl made a big fuss, and as she brandished her jade-like fists, though her appearance was astonishingly beautiful, the power was also very strong, completely suppressing the storm sword tiger. After another few dozen moves, the little girl kicked out and sent the storm sword tiger flying, obtaining a complete victory in this battle. This was still in the severing mundane tier. If their cultivation level was higher, then Hunyo's battle prowess would form a crushing suppression. The difference between an emperor star and a monarch tier could only be manifested at dividing soul in the first place. The people on the storm sword tiger's side were all greatly shocked, and hurriedly helped the storm sword tiger up, turning to run. Even those on Fairy Yunhe's side were extremely shocked. They only knew that Hunyo was a monarch tier, but never imagined that her battle prowess could be so strong. This kind of battle prowess was illogical. How could the difference between monarch tiers reach such an exaggerated level? Nyo is indeed powerful. Hunyo put her hands on her hips, feeling very smug and extremely smug. Fairy Yunhe suppressed the shock in her heart, looked deeply at Hunyo a few times, and then said, "Let's go in." They entered the cave. It was pitch black here, and there was also an indescribable smell of decay that was very pungent. Arriving at the end of the cave, there was a corpse here. It was very tall and had died for who knew how many years. It was so rotten that only a skeleton was left, but there was still a golden robe on it, and it exuded a strong stench. This is an ancient tomb, and this is an ancient corpse. Someone couldn't help but call out. What kind of joke was this? Fairy Yunhe shook her head, pointed at the corpse, and said, "Move this corpse." Everyone looked at each other, and immediately 2 people stepped forward. There's a hole behind the corpse," the 2 immediately exclaimed. Ling Han also went over. Sure enough, because this corpse was too large, and it just happened to block the hole behind, it seemed like this was the end. Whoosh! Just by moving the corpse a little, a powerful suction force appeared, as if it was going to suck them in. But also because this suction was too strong, the corpse was sucked back again, blocking the entrance again. Instantly, the suction disappeared. Come, use force together. The 2 who moved the corpse looked at each other, both blushing slightly. They actually didn't manage to grab the corpse, and couldn't resist the suction, which was a bit embarrassing. Chapter 2294. 2/5 Severance elites actually couldn't even lift a corpse? Wasn't this a colossal joke? When they moved the corpse again, they used all their strength. A corner of the corpse was easily moved away, but when a part of the entrance was revealed, a terrifying suction force was produced. No matter how hard the 2 of them tried, it was useless. They were unable to move the corpse even an inch. The 2 of them had already lost face once, so how could they have the nerve to fail again? Both of them exerted all of their strength. Wung, their bodies shone with talisman light, and their 4 wings also flapped madly. With a flash of blood, one of the men's arms had been torn off, causing blood to gush out like a fountain. This frightened the other man, who quickly let go of his hand. Immediately, the corpse was sucked back in, once again blocking the entrance. "I'm fine," the man with the severed arm said as he operated the power in his body. Under the wrapping of the rule power, a new arm immediately grew out. It was soft and tender. This required the expenditure of a certain amount of blood essence and the power of regulations. As long as they did not suffer any external injuries, cultivators at the severing mundane tier and above would recover very quickly because there was no need to expel the will of the variant martial art. "How did you get injured? Is there something strange about this corpse?" asked Junhee. "No. The man shook his head, a little embarrassed. I used too much force and broke my arm. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief at first, but then they were shocked. He actually used so much strength that he tore off an arm. Just how much strength did he use? Most importantly, he had already used so much strength, yet he still could not move the corpse away. It was evident how strong the suction force was. Moreover, this corpse was just too ferocious, wasn't it? It had already become a skeleton, continuously receiving this kind of suction force, yet it actually didn't shatter. This was also shocking. This robe might be a supreme treasure. Someone's eyes flickered as he stared at the robe on the corpse's body. Everyone nodded. This robe was able to resist the suction force, and its defensive ability had at least reached the level of a 4th Severance Emperor tier or above. The two people just now were at this cultivation level. Let me try. A 5th Severance Monarch tier jumped out. I'll lend you a hand. Another 5th Severance Monarch tier walked out. The two of them moved at the same time, one on the left and one on the right. They grabbed one of the corpse's hands and pulled it out forcefully. As soon as the corpse moved, the suction force instantly came. It was incomparably fierce. The two emperors were also going all out. Veins could be seen popping up on their foreheads, destroying their beautiful faces and making them look extremely ferocious. Their 4 wings were constantly flapping and their 4 legs were in the air. However, a corpse was easy to move, but moving it completely was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It was an almost impossible task. In order to avoid repeating the same mistake, they quickly gave up. How could this be? Everyone was shocked. How were they supposed to get in? Although there was still a small opening, if one was sucked in, who knew what dangers there were inside? This place was full of strange things. Who would believe that this cave was a pure land? Why don't we take off that robe? Someone suggested. The corpse was already rotten, so as long as the robe was taken off, the corpse itself would be easily sucked in. This way, the hole would naturally appear. This was agreed upon by the others, who thought that this was a desirable solution. Ling Han did not object either. He merely frowned slightly, feeling an indescribable unease. They went to undo the corpse's robe, yet discovered that these buttons were extraordinarily difficult to undo. However, after a little less than an hour, they still managed to undo one button, which caused them to instantly cheer. They finally saw hope. They continued to work, and after spending an entire day, they finally completely undid the densely packed buttons on the robe. The entire robe was stuck to the entrance. It fluttered slightly a few times, and it was instantly sucked in. Then that corpse immediately fell apart, and several hundred bones flew into the cave like shooting stars. Not good. Ling Han had just said this when his whole person had already lost control and was being pulled towards the entrance of the cave. Not only him, but everyone was also flying. This suction force was too frightening. Fairy Yun-hee and the others were still desperately flapping their wings, trying their best to stabilize themselves, but what use was that? In the face of this suction force, it was completely insignificant. They were all sucked into the cave, and their bodies continuously spun. Everyone felt so uncomfortable that they wanted to vomit, and they were even more dizzy. A few people even fainted, but they still vomited out of their mouths. After at least the time for an incense stick to burn, they only felt their vision brighten, and what entered their vision was a blinding white. Ping, 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 their bodies fell one after another, falling onto the ground, but they did not feel any pain at all. This was a snowy mountain. No wonder it was so white, so bright, and did not hurt at all when they fell. Everyone groaned and crawled back up. Even those who had fainted opened their eyes in a daze, but immediately began to vomit violently again, still feeling very uncomfortable. Where is this? Everyone asked. Fairy Yun-hee's face was slightly pale. Evidently, the person who drew this map had not entered this place, but had bluffed about which ancestral king's tomb this was, with the goal of raising the value of this map. Selling a map for 2, one could tell the character of the seller. From here onwards, everything was unfamiliar, but it just so happened that it could be extremely dangerous. Bones are scattered all over the ground, but that long robe has disappeared, someone cried out, clutching his head. They really did not get anything. Actually, this was also understandable. When the long robe was blown by the wind, who knew where it would float to? Let's go back first. They wanted to confirm their path of retreat. They did not know north, south, east, west, and west here, and had been dizzy before, so they had completely no idea where they had come from. But that was not important. They only needed to determine the direction of the wind to know. They had been sucked here, so as long as they went against the wind, they would be able to find the exit. They set off, and very quickly found a cave entrance in the middle of the mountain, but the wind that blew out from here was extremely tyrannical. The moment they came into contact with it, they were directly blown out, and had no shred of resistance at all. After trying again and again, they could only give up dejectedly. They could not help but admit that with their current strength, it was impossible for them to charge through. Then we can only find a way to leave here. Everyone sized up the snowy mountain. It was a vast expanse of white, and there was not a trace of other colors at all. Let's go, perhaps we can still find that robe. This was at least a source of motivation. Just as they were about to leave, they heard the cry of an eagle in the sky. They all looked up, only to see an incomparably majestic silver condor streaking across the sky, its wings spread out to a height of 30 meters. Although it was insignificant compared to those huge monsters that were as large as mountains, it emitted a terrifying aura. This silver condor had also noticed them. With just a glance, everyone's heart trembled, and it was indescribably uncomfortable. This saint beast is incredible. It's at least an 8-lotus existence. Everyone's expression changed greatly. If they were targeted by an 8-lotus saint beast, and there was no way out, they could only wait for death. Where do we run to? Chapter 2296. A mere Genesis tier-level demonic beast was naturally as weak as dregs in front of a 5th Severance monarch tier. With a single shout it exploded. My wolf, my wolf. The young man crawled up from the ground. There was a wound left by the white wolf's claws on his lower abdomen that was bleeding, but he did not care at all. Instead, he stared blankly at the blood rain that the white wolf had turned into. Give me back my wolf. The youth's gaze turned from confusion to rage as he roared at the emperor. That emperor was displeased. What kind of status did he have? Even a puny 5-lotus dared to shout at him. He simply didn't know his place. He raised his hand and pointed at the youth. Even if he didn't kill him, he wanted to make the youth suffer a great deal so that he would know what was good for him. Ling Han chuckled and then waved his hand. Ping! That monarch tear was instantly sent flying by him. He is still a youth, and you have indeed destroyed his spoils of battle. Is it wrong to reprimand you? Bewitching Maiden Ro was getting to know Ling Han better and better now. She immediately stood up and said to the youth, Little brother, tell big sister, why are you taking the risk to hunt? What she cultivated was the Tao of bewitchment, and could subdue her opponent without even fighting. Though she had now been reduced to the 5th Severance, it had allowed her to advance into the monarch tier, and her battle prowess in a battle of equals was even stronger. Moreover, this youth was only in the Genesis tier, so he was naturally even less able to resist her bewitchment techniques. The young boy only felt that the woman in front of him was as beautiful as the Virgin Mary, and he couldn't help but want to listen to her. He said, Today is my coming-of-age ceremony. I have to hunt a prey stronger than myself to prove that I am qualified to be a member of the hunting team. Then what is your name, and where are you from? Bewitching Maiden Ro asked again. My name is Yong Chin, the young man said. I come from the Mayhan tribe. Sister, you are so nice, he said with some infatuation. Bewitching Maiden Ro couldn't help but smile proudly. The young man's last words were not because of her charm techniques, but rather because he truly felt that she was beautiful. This flattery made her feel very comfortable. Big sister, I'll use 10 game to propose to you. Will you marry me? Said Yong Chin. Everyone couldn't help but smile. This youth was really interesting. Meanwhile, Bewitching Maiden Ro had a proud expression. Big sister is already married. Yong Chin immediately revealed a look of disappointment, as if life no longer had any meaning. Young man, can you give me this wrist guard? Ling Han asked as he looked at the wrist guard that the young man was wearing. Yong Qin immediately revealed a look of respect and caution. What do you want to do? Who are you people? He had actually blurted out all his secrets in a muddle-headed manner. It was really strange. Ling Han smiled. We are not bad people. You can trust us. Of course, Yong Qin wouldn't believe it. His face was still filled with distrust. Little brother, you have to trust us, bewitching Maiden Rose said, a bright light in her eyes. Yong Qin nodded involuntarily and said, I can't untie this wrist unless I die. Ling Han was surprised. He grabbed the young man's hand and carefully observed the wrist guard. Just now, the young man had been able to kill the white wolf with a single strike. Admittedly, he had been deliberately running all along to lure the white wolf into attacking, and then suddenly turned back to attack. The other reason was that the wrist guard on his hand had shone with light the instant he attacked, and had even strengthened the young man, which was why he had been able to achieve victory with a single strike. But it was different from the precious tools that Ling Han understood. This wrist guard clearly did not have any tool patterns. Though there were some patterns, they were really just for decoration, which made him very curious. Other people did not have such keen senses as he did. After all, Ling Han had been the master of heaven and earth for a period of time, and was now extremely sensitive to changes in power and regulations. Moreover, even if someone knew, they might not take it seriously. That was only at the 5 Lotus level, and was not worthy of their attention at all. Ling Han carefully observed it, but aside from its exquisite appearance, there was nothing special about this wrist guard. His curiosity grew and he probed it with his consciousness, but then something happened. With a paw, this wrist guard actually split open, and then fell from the young man's hand. Ah! Yong Qin exclaimed, and then became dazed. My wrist guard, my wrist guard? He looked like he was in so much pain that he wanted to die. The wrist guard fell, and a needle-like hole could be seen on his wrist. However, the regenerative ability of a Genesis tier was not bad, and this wound very soon recovered. This should have been pierced by the wrist guard. The young man said that this wrist guard could not be taken off unless he died, so this needle hole was the wrist guard's monitoring of his life? Ling Han had bewitching Maiden Ro comfort the young man, while he himself picked up the broken wrist guard and carefully studied it. But he was immediately surprised. The inside of this wrist guard was actually incredibly complicated, turning into multiple thin lines, but now the arrangement of these lines was completely messed up. It was as if this precious tool had self-destructed. Wouldn't it allow others to see the craftsmanship within? Ling Han thought. His strength far surpassed the limits of this wrist guard, so when he invaded with his divine sense, this wrist guard knew that it could not resist, and thus activated the technique of destruction. Strange, really too strange. If the precious tool had a spirit, then the first requirement would be to preserve life, so why would it self-destruct? On the other side, with bewitching Maiden Ro's comfort, the young man also stopped making a fuss, but still looked as if he would rather die than live. According to him, in his tribe, precious tools like this kind of wrist guard were incredibly precious, and were a symbol of status. If it was destroyed, the clansmen would not be able to get up in 1,000 ways. Ling Han was very interested and said, let's go to this little guy's tribe. Fairy Yun He and the others could not think of a better way either, and nodded after looking at each other. They set out with the young man, but after walking for 3 days, they finally arrived at the camp that the young man had spoken of. This was a group of tents that formed a circle. The young man had left by himself a few days ago to hunt a wild beast that was stronger than him to complete his coming-of-age ceremony. A woman was currently waiting at the entrance of Yong Qin's camp, waving at the young man from afar. Mother! The young man also waved and ran towards the woman. Child, you're not hurt, are you? The woman hugged the young man and then looked him up and down, extremely concerned. Mother, I'm fine, Yong Qin said. He seemed a little embarrassed in front of everyone. Where's your wrist guard? The woman noticed that the wrist guard on the young man's hand was gone, and immediately exclaimed, That's a long story. Ling Han also walked over. Who are you people? The woman asked, her face full of wariness. She actually still had a 6 lotus cultivation, but she had only sprouted 1 leaf. She did not have a wrist guard, but she had a shoulder guard, and it was already faintly glowing at this moment. This should be a precious tool similar to the wrist guard the young man was wearing. Ling Han smiled and said, "We're outsiders who accidentally trespassed." This woman was a pure demon, so it was very likely that the young man's father was a member of the angel tribe, and he was a mixed blood. As they spoke, more and more tribesmen walked out and stared at Ling Han and the others. Every one of them held a pitchfork in their hands, and they all had helmets, breastplates, kneecaps, wrist guards, and other treasured tools on their bodies. These people all wore expressions of wariness. Chapter 2297. Ling Han raised his hands and said, "We have no ill intentions. We just accidentally entered this place." An old man walked out from the crowd, holding a walking stick in his hand. His head was already bald, and his 2 white eyebrows drooped down. It was unknown how long he had lived. His eyes were filled with wisdom, and he said, "Where did you come from, and why have you come?" Ling Han briefly explained the experiences of his group, and did not hide anything. If they wanted to win the trust of others, it was best not to tell any lies, and they indeed did not need to hide anything now. When the people in the tribe heard this, they all looked surprised. Outside this world that they lived in, there was actually an even vaster space. The people in the tribe did not have any ulterior motives. Ling Han treated them with sincerity, and they also returned the favor with sincerity, revealing the secret of this place. Their story was actually very simple. They had lived here for generations, and their greatest pursuit was to survive because the resources here were especially scarce. If they wanted to survive, they had to hunt ferocious beasts, or compete with ferocious beasts for herbivores. Ling Han and the others were all surprised. Once they advanced into the second lotus, it was equivalent to the spiritual pedestal tier of the celestial realm, and cultivators only needed to breathe spiritual qi to survive. If they advanced into the mountain river tier, they would not die even if their spiritual qi dried up, but their bodies would become incredibly weak. But the people here were all at the 5th or 6th lotus level, and they actually had to worry about survival. Wasn't that very strange? That's not right. When they heard the words of the people in the tribe, Ling Han and the others also felt that something was wrong. Their power had actually dropped a little. Could it be that we have eaten too little? They had only eaten once every dozen days, and this had affected their power? This was inconceivable. The spiritual qi here is almost dried up, almost impossible to cultivate, they exclaimed in shock. This should have been discovered immediately, but they only realized it now. It was as if there was an inexplicable force here that affected their normal thinking ability. Fuck, what the hell is this place? Everyone was a little afraid. If they did not eat, they could actually starve to death. This was practically a great joke, but now it was a very real threat. Since the spiritual qi is so scarce, how did those saint beasts cultivate? Ling Han asked. This was the result of eating. Although this place was lacking in spiritual energy, it was not that there was none. It was just that it could not be extracted by ordinary means. Only plants that grew on the ground could absorb it. After herbivores ate these grasses, they would naturally store the spiritual energy in their bodies. After these animals were hunted and eaten, they could provide a source of power for martial artists to cultivate. This was understandable, but why would people starve to death without eating? Everyone quickly learned another important piece of information, which was that everyone in the tribe had a limit to their lifespan. The longest recorded lifespan was 800 years, and not from being killed by beasts. Only 800 years. It should be known that heaven-tier cultivators could live for 800 years, and after advancing into the severing mundane tier, they would never have to worry about their lifespan. They only had to endure the immortal's tribulation, but in this place, they had to worry about birth, old age, sickness, and death. It's just like how the immortal's tribulation happens once a year here. Thus, even the strongest person here can only last for 800 years before being killed, Ling Han deduced. This was not impossible, because even the situation of people starving to death had occurred, so it was not impossible that the frequency of the immortal's tribulation had increased. Ling Han asked the tribesmen about the specific situation of this realm, but although this tribe was constantly moving, their range of activity was limited to a radius of 2,000 miles. They could not move any further. That was the territory of another tribe, and if they barged in, it was possible that they would start a war. Ling Han was very interested in their protective gear, and asked about the origins of these things. All the protective gear comes from the holy mountain, the elder of the tribe said. According to him, as long as the materials were forged into the shape of wrist guards, knee guards, and so on, and then brought to the holy mountain, they could be brought back to use after 3 years. These protective gears could increase their attack and defense, but when they were used, they would absorb their blood. Thus, each person could only use one. If they used 1 or 2 more, their blood essence would be completely absorbed, and they would die prematurely. The most precious thing in the tribe was the protective gear, which was what they relied on to survive. The second most precious thing was food. In fact, the two were about the same. Thus, the tribesmen did not give Ling Han and the others protective gear, nor did they treat them with food. Ling Han and the others did not feel anything at first, but now they felt incredibly hungry. It was as if they had really become ordinary people. We must have entered the domain of some powerhouse, and this place is governed by his rules. Thus, we will grow old and die, and we will feel hunger and thirst, they all deduced. But the influence is so great that it can even repel the normal rules of heaven and earth. Just how powerful is this person? Everyone was speechless. A celestial sovereign? Someone asked with a trembling voice. Fairy Yun he immediately shook her head. It's just repel the rules in a small area. Any ancestral king can do that, but the stronger the ancestral king, the wider the area of influence. Immortal kings were equal to the rules, so it was still possible for them to repel the rules of heaven and earth in a small area. But even if it was just one of the 10 Lotus ancestral kings, with their strength, could they resist? An ancestral king would not do such a thing, Ling Han said. If that was the case, the ancestral king would be too bored. Perhaps this ancestral king has already transformed into Tao, or is heavily injured, and has fallen into a state of unconsciousness. He was not too worried. If he really had no other way out, he could explode with the might of the Black Tower and force his way out. However, if he did that, the Black Tower would probably really become a useless tower, without the slightest bit of power left. Thus, unless it was absolutely necessary, he would not use the Black Tower again. Ling Han smiled and took out some food from the Black Tower. Instantly, not only did the members of the tribe look covetous, but even the eyes of Fairy Yun He and the others lit up. At their level, their spatial god tools would only store some star stones and celestial medicine, so how could there possibly be food? Food in exchange for protective gear? He asked smilingly. Don't lie to me, there must be protective gear that has not been used before. The members of the tribe all stared at the food and swallowed repeatedly. Esteemed guest, you have to know that the metal or used to make protective gear is also very difficult to mine, the elder of the tribe said. This was the rhythm of bargaining. Ling Han was not afraid that these people would ask for a high price, but he was afraid that they would stubbornly refuse to exchange. Thus, he smiled and said, I can add some food, the key is how much you have to exchange. The elder smiled, and all the wrinkles on his face melted like a flower. The two sides haggled, and Ling Han used a large amount of food to exchange for a set of protective gear that could be equipped from head to toe. However, he was told by the tribe that even if some people were incredibly strong, they could at most wear 2 protective gear at the same time, or else they would be courting death. Ling Han nodded. He exchanged for an extra pair of wrist guards, and then tossed it to Yong Qin to compensate him for the losses he had suffered during the day. Then, he immediately began to study these protective gear. Chapter 2298. However, before starting his research, Ling Han was dragged along by the girls to eat a meal first. Everyone was hungry. There were special rules here that made them suffer the same problems as ordinary people while maintaining their strength, thirst and hunger, and they were also limited by their lifespan. They were all very anxious to find a way to leave as soon as possible, or they might really die of old age here. Moreover, after this lesson, they definitely had to prepare some food in their spatial god tool in the future. Perhaps it would be of great use. Ling Han very generously took out food and distributed it to everyone, but the amount was quite limited, just enough for everyone to barely fill their stomachs. If they wanted more, they could exchange for it with celestial medicine. This made everyone die of anger. He was clearly robbing them while they were down. But Ling Han didn't steal or rob. He was clearly stronger than them, but didn't forcefully rob, so what could they say? A few people couldn't resist and went out to hunt. Ling Han chuckled, and after letting Hun Yo and the others eat their fill, he entered the Black Tower. Before entering, he first drew a line in the air, cutting out a space, and then put the 2 scrolls that couldn't be opened inside. This couldn't be put into the Black Tower, nor into a spatial container, and could only be stored between heaven and earth. As if they were the private property of heaven, and couldn't leave the sight of heaven and earth for a moment. Of course, the void was also the territory of heaven, but very, very few people would enter. Ling Han used the regulations of space to cut out a stable space that could last for a very long time without collapsing. These 2 were really big shots. Every time they entered the Black Tower, he had to first arrange a place for them to stay. He sighed and entered the Black Tower. Instantly, he felt his body lighten, as if something had been pressing down on him, and now it had disappeared. "Small tower, wake up," Ling Han said. Because this was a foreign realm, it couldn't be replenished by the power of heaven and earth of the celestial realm, so Small Tower was always in a state of deep sleep and wouldn't easily wake up. "You're wasting my power again." Small Tower's voice was unhurriedly heard. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Sense it, what power is this?" Small Tower paused for a moment, then said, "The power of an 8th heaven celestial king, but it's lifeless. It should be a 9th layer immortal king transforming into the Tao, his body merging with this world and replacing the original laws of this place. It is also because of this that the power to control the world has fallen to the 8th layer. A dead immortal king was naturally not as good as when he was alive, so it was understandable that he fell from the 9th heaven to the 8th heaven." Ling Han nodded. As long as it was not the power of a heavenly venerable, the Black Tower would definitely be able to break through the encirclement. At the very least, there would definitely be a way out. He was reassured. When the other party sold Fairy Yunhe's map, he said that this was the tomb of an ancestral king. He must have been making it up, but he didn't expect that he would be right. This really was an ancestral king tomb, and it was the burial place of the 18 Lotus ancestral kings. Were these strange protective gears forged by the power of this celestial king? Ling Han picked up a wrist guard. As long as this thing was placed on the so-called holy mountain, it would automatically change from an ordinary tool to a precious tool. It could only be said that it was influenced by the power of a celestial king. He put on this wrist guard and immediately felt something sharp prick his skin. However, his physique was too strong, so it couldn't pierce through his skin. With a thought, he automatically reduced the strength of his physique. Suddenly, he felt a slight pain. A thin needle had pierced into his skin and pierced into his blood vessels. Ling Han was astonished. He felt that this wrist guard had become one with him, as if it had become a part of his body. Interesting. With a thought, the patterns on the wrist guard immediately lit up and a blazing power surged into his body, causing his battle prowess to increase slightly. However, a drop of his blood was extracted. Was this the price that the tribesman had mentioned that one had to pay for using protective gears? Ling Han was astonished. Although a drop of his blood had been extracted, compared to his body, this was really a small matter. Moreover, his life force was incredibly boundless. As long as it wasn't blood essence that he sucked, he could continuously produce ordinary blood. Of course, this ordinary blood was also relative. He had a body that had been tempered by the indestructible heaven scroll, and ordinary blood could also compare to other people's blood essence. Going by this, the number of protective gears that I can use at the same time is far from just 1 or 2, he murmured. He probed his divine sense into the wrist guard again. The result was good. Even if this wrist guard was his, it couldn't be probed by him and instantly shattered with a paw. The protective gear itself isn't as strong as mine, so when it encountered my divine sense probing, it would shatter. But if it's stronger than mine, it should be able to reflect my divine sense. Otherwise, this kind of precious tool would have no meaning at all. When facing an enemy, it would be shattered with a sweep of divine sense. Thankfully, I've also exchanged for a few more wrist guards. Ling Han put on the wrist guard again. This time, it wasn't just one wrist guard, but a pair. With 2 wrist guards activated at the same time, the burden on Ling Han was naturally greater, but it was still insignificant. What about 3? What about 4? Ling Han put on the protective gear one by one. Gradually, he was armed from head to toe. However, the tribesmen had never thought to wear this as a set, so it wasn't very fitting, and there were obvious gaps between the protective gear. But Ling Han was a little shocked. He punched out, and peng, a wave of power surged out, turning into a terrifying energy storm. My original battle prowess was about the Earth Soul stage, but now it has reached the Heaven Soul stage, or even a little stronger. In other words, a complete set of protective gear can increase my battle prowess by a small tier, which is equivalent to me advancing from King tier to Emperor tier, Emperor tier to Emperor tier, and Emperor tier to Emperor star. This was very shocking. It was only a set of protective gear, and in reality, this protective gear wasn't difficult to obtain. As long as the finished embryo was placed on the Holy Mountain, it would be completed in 3 years. If this thing can be used in the 2-realm battlefield, wouldn't the foreign realm be like a tiger that has grown wings? Ling Han mused. This kind of secret technique seemed to be limited to this world, and no one else knew about it. His vitality was really too vigorous. Even if he was fully armed and showed his might at the same time, he could completely withstand it. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, and his iron-skinned appearance instantly gave everyone a shock. Seeing that Ling Han looked like a god, everyone in the tribe knelt down and paid their respects to Ling Han. Their expressions were extremely respectful, and they really worshipped him as a god. Meanwhile, Hunyao and the others looked at each other, feeling that Ling Han's appearance was a little silly. Ling Han hadn't thought that his appearance would have this kind of effect, but when he thought about it again, the tribesman could only wear 2 protective gear at most, and he wore all of them, so it would be strange if he wasn't shocked. He laughed and called Hunyao and the others over. He planned to head to the Holy Mountain as soon as possible. The corpse of the 18 Lotus Ancestor Kings should be there, and if he could deal with it, then he wouldn't have to use the Black Tower. Additionally, he was very interested in this method of forging protective gear. If he could obtain it, then when the celestial realm fought against the foreign realm, the situation would be much better. Chapter 2300. The divine demon sword appeared, glowing with a cold light and exuding a frightening murderous aura. Ling Han roared and charged forward with the divine demon sword in hand. The huge worm did not know how powerful the divine demon sword was, and charged forward fearlessly. Its shell was indeed hard, and cultivators of the same cultivation level could not hurt it at all unless they wielded a sharp weapon. Ling Han swung his sword, and a magnificent sword light soared into the sky as if splitting open the sky. Poof! The sword light sank into the huge worm's body, and then surged out from the other side, illuminating the sky. Ling Han's figure swept past, and then the huge worm was split in 2. Green blood splattered, and its life aura was gone. Everyone was speechless in shock. What was this situation? He was clearly at an absolute disadvantage, but he instantly turned the situation around with a sword, and even won with a single strike. This was too exaggerated. Moreover, when they thought about it again, Ling Han was a 6 Lotus 5-leaf cultivator, but he could instantly kill a 7 Lotus 4-leaf cultivator. Did the cultivation level barriers still apply to him? The iron law of martial art was useless. Ling Han swung his sword a few more times, and dismembered the worm. He found a green bead in its heart, but it was only the size of a fist. This was the energy core of the huge worm, and its power could be extracted. As for the worm meat, Ling Han and the others naturally would not eat it. They would only think of eating it if they were starving to death. Brother Tyrant, you're too. Fairy Yun, he was speechless. This person's ferocity had reached an indescribable level. And that sword, which easily sliced open the tough worm shell, was also extremely powerful. This sword is incredible. They all said in their minds. When this sword was drawn, they all felt a strange chill, as if their skin was being cut. Their hearts trembled, and their guts felt cold. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, We can go up the mountain now. He took the lead, and the Empress and the others followed closely behind. They were already used to Ling Han's freakishness. As for the others, they were in a daze, and followed behind Ling Han blankly like puppets. Although Fairy Yun he was following them, she didn't know where she was stepping on at all. In her eyes, there was only Ling Han. Although this demon was extremely ugly and boorish like a pig, she really couldn't deny his talent and strength in martial art. A 6-lotus 5-leaf martial monarch could fight a 7-lotus 1-leaf martial monarch at most. However, against a 7-lotus 2-leaf martial monarch, they would definitely be defeated. This was the Iron Rule, the suppression of a major realm. However, not only could Ling Han easily kill the 2-leaf and 3-leaf insects, but he could even kill the 4-leaf insects with a single strike. Such power made her heart palpitate. How could an emperor be so powerful? They did not even have an emperor star. Have you ever seen a 7-lotus 9-leaf emperor star defeat an 8-lotus 4-leaf cultivator? She was a proud daughter of the heavens and had extremely high standards. Only the emperor star could move her heart, but if someone really wanted to pursue her, she would still be a bit more reserved and consider the other party's character. However, Ling Han's current strength caused her body to heat up the moment she thought of it. There was an indescribable heat flowing through her body, and she wanted nothing more than to throw herself into this man's arms and enjoy his heavy kisses and rough caresses. In fact, he could even fiercely press her under his body. She was suddenly startled. She had actually become such a female hoodlum. That was a demon race that was as ugly as a pig. With that red skin, ugly horns, and sturdy arms of yours, if you were to hug her, she would definitely be filled with a sense of security. Pooey, pooey, pooey. Fairy Yun he hurriedly held her head. She had actually gone astray again. She sighed inwardly. She was afraid that she had fallen in love with this wild man from the demon clan. They advanced towards the holy mountain, but the journey was indeed not peaceful. Very soon, another golden bear ran out. It was so small that it was only about a foot tall. It looked extremely adorable, but it was incredibly savage. The moment it appeared, it waved its bare claws. The claw shadows became tangible and sliced towards them like sharp blades. However, this golden bear's cultivation level was not high and was captured by bewitching Maiden Row. She did not kill it and instead planned to keep it as a pet. Next, they encountered another holy deer. It had the body of a deer, but from the neck onward, it actually had a human head and a pair of arms. Its strength was astonishingly powerful. Even when Ling Han drew out the divine demon sword, it was useless. He was still beaten into a sorry state and fled. The gap in cultivation level was too great, and even Ling Han could do nothing. They could only retreat. After fleeing for 3 days and 3 nights, that holy deer finally stopped its pursuit. With a flap of its wings, it flew back. "Damn deer, Nyo will definitely eat your flesh." Hu Nyo shouted loudly, incredibly furious. Ling Han also wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. The divine demon sword wasn't omnipotent. That holy deer was far too powerful, and it didn't give his sword chi any chance to strike. No matter how sharp the divine demon sword was, it was useless. Unless its level caught up to or even surpassed this holy deer's, then after it activated itself, killing it would be like slaughtering a chicken. Otherwise, no matter how sharp a sharp weapon was, it would only be a dead object. It couldn't be helped. The regulations of the celestial realm in the divine demon sword could not be activated, and its cultivation level was always the same as Ling Han's. Of course, if it was not for the divine demon sword, they might still be able to escape, but it was possible that a few of them would die, and they might even use up a few life-saving treasures. They rested for a few days, and had no choice but to eat a big meal to replenish their exhausted strength. Then, they would continue, and once again rush to the holy mountain. However, that holy deer seemed to be at odds with them, and actually ran over them again, causing them to flee in a sorry state again. After so many torments, Ling Han and the others actually spent almost half a year without being able to enter the mountain, which made everyone feel irritated. If they could not leave this place, their lifespan might only be 81,000 years at most, and they could really count the days of their deaths with their fingers. A dignified emperor tier and monarch tier of 6 lotus would actually die from their lifespan running out. They would not be able to die in peace. They summed up their experience and lessons. No matter what, even if they encountered the holy deer again this time, they would run to the holy mountain. Otherwise, they could forget about climbing the mountain for the rest of their lives. After making up their minds, they set off again. Wait! Ling Han suddenly waved his hand. He heard some movement. The long grass in the distance parted, and a group of people suddenly dashed out. Rainstorm Sword Hero, Fairy Yun He's eyes narrowed slightly. She did not expect them to come again. This was also because they had been trapped here for as long as half a year. Otherwise, if everything had gone smoothly, they would have obtained the secret of the battle armor and left long ago. However, Ling Han's gaze was fixed on another person. This was a single-horned demon. He was extremely burly, and his tail twitched from time to time, but it stirred up the air, causing chaos. This person was very, very strong. "Ha, you didn't expect us to meet again, did you?" The Rainstorm Sword Hero laughed loudly, but his voice was cold. Originally, the Rainstorm clan did not have much interest in this ancient tomb. Although it was said to be the tomb of an ancestral king, the ancestral king was undying and indestructible. How could there be so many ancestral king tombs in the world? That was why the Rainstorm Sword Hero had appeared as a leader. He first came to scout out the situation. If it was really worth developing, then naturally it was not something that the Rainstorm Sword Hero could handle. He would return to the clan and ask for help from even greater figures. However, they were beaten out before they could even enter. This made the Rainstorm clan furious. Chapter 2301. The single-horned demon stepped out, his gaze sweeping over Ling Han and the others, and he said calmly, "This demon stays, and the others break an arm each. You can all scram." Fairy Yun He and the others were enraged. "You're too unreasonable. And, do you want to die?" A fierce glint flashed in the single-horned demon's eyes, causing everyone to feel a tightness in their chest, so uncomfortable that they wanted to vomit blood. This person was too powerful. Perhaps he was an 8 Lotus elite. "Don't make me regret it, scram," the single-horned demon said darkly. Ling Han's expression was solemn. This demon was very powerful and could not be underestimated. He chuckled and said, "How did I provoke you? As a member of the demon clan, you're actually mingling with ugly things like the angel clan. You've lost all our face," the unicorn demon said coldly. "I only have one way to deal with scum like you." He paused and murderously said, "Die." Ling Han shrugged. "But I haven't lived enough." "You're seeking death." The single-horned demon directly charged out, his hand pressing down. Instantly, countless meteors fell, terrifying to the extreme. Ling Han nodded internally. This guy was indeed very powerful, but compared to that holy deer, he was far inferior. He drew out the divine demon sword to meet it. Shwa, a streak of sword chi slashed across the sky. Pa 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 pa, the meteors that smashed toward Ling Han instantly exploded, and the rest crashed into the ground, causing it to shake continuously. The single-horned demon looked at the sword in Ling Han's hand, his eyes blazing, and said, "Good sword. No matter how good it is, it has nothing to do with you." Ling Han laughed and drew his sword. "Falling into the hands of trash like you is like throwing pearls into darkness." The single-horned demon sneered. He struck out with his palms, naturally not letting the divine demon sword or the sword chi slashed out touch his body. He only used his power to shock his body. His cultivation level was far above Ling Han's, and he was confident that he could shock Ling Han to death with his power, making it impossible for him to use the power of his weapon. This was indeed a very good strategy. The difference in their realms was too great, and their combat prowess was not on the same level at all. However, he would never have thought that Ling Han's physique would far surpass his realm. This little bit of shock was not even an itch to him, and only the holy deer could truly threaten Ling Han. While they were fighting, the horned demon clan was disdainful at first, but then they became solemn, and in the end, they furrowed their brows. He had never seen a 6 Lotus that was so hard to kill. Was this really the 6 lotuses? It was rare to find such a monster among the 7 lotuses. At this moment, a black shadow covered the sky and cast down a huge shadow. Ling Han and the others had already formed a subconscious reaction. They all shouted loudly, "Get lost!" Instantly, everyone broke into a run, even faster than a rabbit slipping away. Just nice, these people from the Rainstorm clan can attract this sacred beast's attention. What a good person. The corner of the Horned Demon clan's mouth twitched. Ling Han had actually run away just like that. Run away. He wanted to give chase, but the black shadow above his head had already enveloped him. He saw that it was a holy deer, but from the neck down, it was in the shape of a human. Its arms were spread open, and blazing white balls of electricity were condensed in its hands. With just a glance, the Horned Demon clan's entire body shivered, and he hurriedly shouted, "Retreat! Retreat!" This holy deer was too powerful, and it was difficult for him to match it. He had to use his trump card. Perhaps he could only parry it, but winning would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. This time, the holy deer did not pay attention to Ling Han and the others. Instead, it set its sights on the Rainstorm clan's party. Perhaps it was tired of playing with it and wanted to exchange it for a new toy. It began to chase after them, forcing the Horned Demon clan's party to use his trump card. It was a fruit, and after he consumed it, his combat prowess increased greatly. He could fight head-on with the sacred beast without falling into a disadvantageous position, but he could forget about killing his opponent. Ling Han and the others took this opportunity to escape. They had already made up their minds, so this time, they naturally went straight up the mountain. More than an hour later, they finally arrived at the foot of the holy mountain and took the first step up the mountain. As soon as they took this step, the scenery in front of them changed. The originally golden holy mountain became lifeless, and black gas rose from the ground everywhere, transforming into all kinds of strange shapes. Is this the holy mountain? Everyone shook their heads. This was simply a dead mountain. Let's go. They went up the mountain, and according to the tribe's description, they arrived at a valley. Then they went up. The valley was very steep, and there were cliffs on almost all sides. The bottom was filled with sharp rocks. If that was all, no one would care, but the problem was that the gravity here was too strong. It was difficult to even take a step. If they fell from the top, they would definitely die. Of course, why would they play rock climbing here if they had nothing better to do? It was very simple. If they wanted the rough embryo to evolve, they had to place it on the mountain wall. Couldn't they place it at the bottom? That was fine, but don't forget that there was not only one tribe living in this area, but many. In order to compete for food, there would be fights and even wars between them. If they placed the rough embryo at the foot of the mountain wall, wouldn't that be equivalent to giving it away? One had to know that metal was very precious here, even more precious than food. Therefore, everyone would climb up the cliff as much as possible, then dig a hole and place the rough embryo inside. The higher the hole was, the better it was hidden, and the less likely it would be taken away by others. Ling Han and the others were not interested in the rough embryo, but wanted to know the secret of evolution. They searched around the valley, trying to figure out what kind of power made the rough embryo undergo such a huge change. The tribesmen were very respectful of this place. It was obvious that they called it the Holy Mountain. Naturally, they did not dare to wantonly destroy it. But Ling Han and the others were different. They dug 3 feet into the ground, and if necessary, they would not hesitate to flatten the entire valley. However, the gravity here was too strong. Just standing was a very tiring thing, not to mention moving around. And under such gravity, the mountain was also extremely hard, and it would take a long time to smash down a piece of rock. Perhaps they could indeed tear down this valley, but the time needed might be 10,000 years, 100,000 years. The key was, did they have that much time? Here, they would feel hungry, and would also encounter the problem of the limit of their lifespan. At most, they would not live more than 1,000 years, so where would they have so much time? Then what to do? If they could not solve the secret of the valley, they naturally could not find the way out, and might really die of old age here. Ling Han took out the divine demon sword, and slashed at the mountain wall. This was a celestial tool, the sharpest and hardest thing in the world. The effect was obvious, and he soon carved out a cave that could accommodate people. He entered first, and everyone hurriedly followed. This might be their way out. In this place, everyone had become flesh and blood, and they weren't like the celestial gods that didn't know fatigue in the outside world. After working for half a day, Ling Han's arms were incredibly sore, so he handed the divine demon sword to Hunyo to continue. Hunyo only worked for 6 hours before letting the Empress take over, and the Empress also only worked for 6 hours before handing the task to Bewitching Maiden Ro, and Bewitching Maiden Ro was much inferior and could only last for 2 hours. Chapter 2302. Everyone took turns, and Ling Han wasn't afraid that someone would snatch the divine demon sword. Firstly, he was the strongest, and secondly, the divine demon sword had his martial art intent, so it had to be at least several times stronger than him to be able to erase his intent. Otherwise, the divine demon sword would automatically attack. Everyone was full of praise for the divine demon sword. Most people thought that it was very likely to be forged from a precious metal on the level of 9 lotus. No matter what, they didn't dare to think in the direction of an ancestral tool. 6 lotus and 5 leaf cultivators owning ancestral tools? What kind of joke was that? Half a month passed, and it just so happened that it was Ling Han's turn to cut the rocks. There was a crashing sound, and the rocks he cut actually didn't fall in their direction, but fell on the other side. Ling Han was stunned at first, and then he was overjoyed. This belly of the mountain was hollow, and he had dug into this area. He used the sword demon sword to cut a few more times, cutting out a hole that could allow one person to pass through, and first put his divine sense in. The whole belly of the mountain was completely hollow and incredibly huge. If Ling Han walked forward through this hole that he had dug, he would step on empty air and then fall tens of thousands of feet into the abyss. Even if there weren't sharp rock spikes below, it was possible that he would fall to pieces. Because the gravity here was too strong, this was like a sharp blade hanging over everyone's head. Ling Han explained the situation to everyone, and they were all stunned. He put Hunyo and the others into the Black Tower, and then left the hole first, climbing down the cliff. The others actually wanted to enter into Ling Han's spatial god tool, but were too embarrassed to ask, so they could only climb by themselves. They couldn't enter someone else's spatial god tool because they didn't know the situation at all. What if they suddenly wanted to come out, and fell to their death before they even set foot on the ground? They didn't trust each other to that extent yet. Ling Han crawled for a very long time. In terms of height, he was already several dozen kilometers deep underground. However, the gravity here was too strong, so his speed was very slow. Otherwise, wouldn't he be able to travel several dozen kilometers in the blink of an eye? It was pitch black here, and even with his eyesight, he was unable to see more than 10 meters away. Moreover, his divine sense was also pulled by gravity and was unable to reach too far away. Since it was already difficult for him, the others were naturally even more frightened. Fortunately, Ling Han was leading the way. Otherwise, their speed would have been several times slower, or even more than 10 times slower. Meanwhile, a feeling of grievance rose up in Fairy Yunhe's heart. Why was it that Ling Han was willing to put Hunyo and the others into the spatial god tool, yet didn't even bother to ask her? The more she thought about it, the more aggrieved she felt. She was on the verge of tears. At this moment, Ling Han let out a cry of surprise. "We're almost at the bottom." Everyone's spirits were lifted. They stopped one after another and descended. Previously, they were only concerned with climbing the cliff and had placed all their attention on it. How could they have the spare time to pay attention to anything else? Only at this moment did they notice a faint light rising from below. Finally, they were about to reach the bottom. They all breathed a sigh of relief. After climbing for a while more, Ling Han's brow furrowed slightly. That was because he was clear now. There was actually an underground river below him, and the light he had sensed earlier was some unknown substance in the flowing water. It was speckled like stars. The flowing water was silent, frighteningly quiet. Ling Han explained the situation, then stopped. He was about 3 meters away from the river below. Everyone descended to this height and stood beside Ling Han, but no one entered the river. Who knew what this river water was? What if it was filled with deadly poison? Ling Han did not pay attention to the others. He first took out some stones and metals from the Black Tower and tossed them into the river one by one to observe if anything strange would appear. Hua! These things were tossed into the river, and splashes rose up. Then, they sank as they were washed away by the flowing water, and nothing strange could be seen. Ling Han pondered for a moment, then drew out a small tree and tossed it into the river. The space of the Black Tower was so big, and there was everything inside. The buoyancy of the small tree was much greater. It did not sink to the bottom, but rather floated above, going with the flow. Seeing this, everyone was also overjoyed and said, "A boat can cross." Although the Black Tower was large, it did not have everything. At least, there was no ready-made boat. They were now holding onto the cliff, and withstanding the huge gravity, so the difficulty of making a boat was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Ling Han directly picked a huge tree, then said, "I say jump, everyone jump on the tree together." Everyone nodded, knowing that Ling Han would definitely throw out a large tree next. Ling Han raised his hand, and instantly, a tree appeared in the river. The crown of the tree was huge and could be used as a boat. "Jump!" Ling Han shouted, and immediately jumped down. Everyone hurriedly jumped out one by one, landing on the tree. Strangely, sitting on the tree, they did not feel the slightest pressure of gravity, as if coming here, the rules of heaven and earth had undergone a huge change. Could there be a way out of here at the end of this underground river? Someone asked. He was really afraid of this place, and would rather not get the secret of the battle armor, only wanting to leave this place as soon as possible. Perhaps it is the core of this place, and contains all the secrets. Yet Ling Han knew that this was the burial ground of the 18 Lotus ancestral kings, and perhaps the remains of this ancestral king could be found at the end. He was very enthusiastic about this, because he had obtained enlightenment from the Rain Emperor. If he fused with the remains of a 9th heaven celestial king, it was possible to form 9 divided souls. The Empress and Hunyeo both had hopes of becoming Emperor stars, but limited by the scarcity of source power of heaven and earth and the rarity of celestial king bones, they broke through with only 4 divided souls. But if they obtained the ancestral king bones of this place, then becoming Emperor stars would not be an extravagant wish. At that time, even if the Black Tower exhausted the last shred of its power, Ling Han would still suppress the ancestral king bones. He had Hunyeo and the others come out, so there was temporarily no danger. The boat sailed with the flow of the river and was very stable, but good times did not last long. More than 2 hours later, the flow of the river suddenly became turbulent, and the great tree trembled violently, causing everyone to become nervous. This wouldn't capsize, right? Ling Han was just about to draw Hunyeo and the others back into the Black Tower when he saw the top of the great tree suddenly sink down, and then rise up again. A large wave immediately crashed over, and hua, the sound of water rang out. Everyone did not know what the hell this river was, and naturally wanted to dodge, but they shockingly discovered that they could not move. No, it was not that they could not move, but rather that their speed had slowed down to the extreme, and they could only watch as this wave crashed over. A realization rose up in Ling Han's mind. It was not that their speed had slowed down, but rather that there was a problem with the flow of time. Their flow of time had slowed down who knew how many times compared to the outside world, and that was why they could not reach what they wanted. Hold on, if his flow of time had slowed down, why could he feel it? Logically speaking, because the flow of time was too different, he would not even have the time to react before being slammed by the river wave, so why would he have this kind of feeling? There was only one reason for this. His physical body's flow of time had indeed slowed down, but his spirit had not. The river slammed over, drenching everyone, yet did not cause any effect. Chapter 2304. Not delicious. Hunyeo stuck out her tongue. She was a standard foodie, and in her eyes, there was no such thing as cute or not, but whether it was delicious or not. The Empress, however, did not care at all. Though she was not a foodie, she was incredibly proud, thinking that she was the greatest and most beautiful in the world, and everyone else had to step aside. This metal man walked over step by step, very slowly and mechanically, still swaying. Sure enough, it was very cute. Bewitching Maiden Ro immediately jumped out and spread her arms towards that metal man. The metal man raised its head towards Bewitching Maiden Ro, and 2 rays of red light shot out from its eyes, shooting towards Bewitching Maiden Ro. Bewitching Maiden Ro rebuked lightly and placed her hands in front of her. Regulations surged, turning into a shield. The red light hit the shield, and an even more blazing light burst out, while Bewitching Maiden Ro slid back. Tang tang, she only stopped after retreating over a dozen steps. The metal man did not stop once it attacked. With a spring of its leg, it charged towards Bewitching Maiden Ro again. "Are you bullying me?" Bewitching Maiden Ro said angrily. This guy looked so cute, but actually dared to attack her. She did not think it was cute anymore. She attacked brazenly. She had Earth Soul Tier cultivation, but had battle prowess at the peak stage of 5 souls, enough to look down on the entire Dividing Soul Tier. The metal man's eyes lit up. This was its attack method, capable of long-range attacks, and the power was actually quite strong, forcing Bewitching Maiden Ro back again. Everyone was shocked. What the hell was this metal man? If it was 8 lotuses, then suppressing Bewitching Maiden Ro should be a piece of cake. But if it was 7 lotuses, then what shocking forging methods would it have to have battle prowess that surpassed the limits? This must be a puppet. Fairy Yunhe's expression changed and she said, "This is a battle tool from the Xian'an plane. That's right, it must be." Reminded by her, everyone nodded, looking enlightened. Ling Han was very curious. How did the Xian'an plane come to have so many strange things? This plane seemed to be very reliant on external objects, such as battle armor, which could greatly increase a cultivator's battle prowess. Furthermore, what he obtained was the crudest object, and had not been meticulously processed at all. He only had to leave it here for 3 years. And if it was made with advanced craftsmanship, just how shocking would its combat strength be? Now, another strange battle soldier had appeared here. It should be at the Dividing Soul Tier, but its battle prowess surpassed that of a Heavenly Soul Tier, which was truly astonishing. It should be known that only Heavenly Soul Tier emperors could compare with Bewitching Maiden Ro. The battle was intense, and Bewitching Maiden Ro did not have the upper hand at all. She was most proficient in the Tao of Bewitchment, but her current opponent was a battle machine. It could be said that she had used her charming eyes on a blind man, and it was completely useless. Thus, she could only rely on martial arts to win. This wasn't her forte, and she couldn't suppress this battle weapon at all. Ling Han felt that the things in Xian'an plane were more and more interesting. If he could secretly learn it and bring it back to the celestial domain, it could greatly increase the strength of the celestial domain. Then, it would be much easier to resist the invasion of the other side. He leapt out and reached out to grab the battle weapon. Bewitching Maiden Ro saw him make his move, and very cooperatively leaped back. She was not competitive at all. In front of Ling Han, she knew when to advance and when to retreat. She would definitely not deliberately steal Ling Han's limelight or embarrass Ling Han. Peng Ling Han merely pressed down with a palm, and this battle weapon was immediately suppressed to the ground, completely unable to move. He had the battle prowess of one of the 3 secrets of the Immortal Mansion. Everyone was already used to this sight, and knew that Ling Han's strength was already indescribable with words. Ling Han instinctively probed the battle weapon with his divine sense, but with a pa, this battle weapon immediately shattered, just like those battle armors from before. He picked up the shattered piece of metal, and saw that it was filled with multiple metal threads, which were incredibly complicated. It had self-destructed again. It seemed as if the Xian'an plane had applied a special method on their products, so that they would not be afraid even if they landed in the hands of their enemies. Those who were weak would not be able to probe it with their divine sense at all, but those who were too strong would immediately self-destruct, and definitely not allow their enemies to pry into the secrets within. This was troublesome. If they could not study it, how could they bring this kind of craftsmanship back to the celestial domain? Ling Han shook his head, and casually tossed the piece of metal to one side. The others did not pick it up. These kinds of scrap battle armors and battle weapons could be found everywhere in the two-realm battlefield, and there were also quite a few that were countless times more advanced. But who knew how many epics they had been studied by the ancestral kings, and what use did they have? There was absolutely no value in studying them at all. Let's go. They continued forward. The problem now was no longer the secret of the battle weapons and battle armors of the Shenanai Plain, but how exactly were they going to leave? Otherwise, in a mere 1,000 years, they would all die. The group continued forward. This time, they paid close attention to the changes in the sound of their footsteps, lest they were ambushed by someone. The battle prowess of this battle weapon was extremely astonishing, and there might even be one that was even stronger than this one. After walking for about an hour, they all stopped in their tracks, because they heard that there was an additional sound of footsteps amidst the echoes. They stopped. The sound of footsteps was rapidly approaching, and it was far faster than that of the previous battle weapon. Was this a completely different battle weapon? They turned back. It was too dark here, and the visibility was extremely poor. They could only barely see things that were 10 meters away. After another short while, a figure appeared. Fuck, how could it be a person? This wasn't a battle weapon, but rather a member of the demon race. He had a single horn on his head, and he was precisely the strongest expert of the Rainstorm clan. He was in a somewhat sorry state, and there were still injuries on his body. His face was filled with ruthlessness. Previously, he had been chased by the sacred deer. Although he had taken out his trump card and fought with his life on the line, he was still no match for it. Everyone who had come with him had all been swallowed alive, and only he had luckily escaped with his life. This was also because he had entered the sacred mountain, or else he would have undoubtedly died. He transferred this hatred onto Ling Han and the others. He also knew about what had happened in the valley, so he had chased all the way here. Although he hadn't caught up to Ling Han and the others, he had discovered the hole that had been opened, and he still followed them. It was only now that he had finally caught up. "All of you kneel," he shouted coldly. All the clansmen he had brought with him had died. He was both heartbroken and furious, but he didn't dare to fight that sacred deer to the death. He could only vent his anger on Ling Han and the others. "Unicorn, not only are you ugly, your words stink as well," Ling Han said in disdain. When Fairy Yunhee and the others heard this, they all felt that it was funny. That was because Ling Han also had two horns. Ling Han was a unicorn while Ling Han was a two-horned beast. Wasn't this the pot calling the kettle black? The single-horned demon humphed. He stretched out his right hand and swatted at Hunyeo and the others. He knew that Ling Han was very strange. Although his battle prowess was very low, his physique was enough to withstand his attacks. Thus, he wanted to capture Hunyeo and the others first. Despicable hand, Ling Han's eyes turned cold. Shwa. The divine demon sword was unsheathed. There was a flash of cold light, and an arm had already been sent flying through the air before landing heavily on the ground. This arm belonged to the horned demon. His name was Feng Yuan. He stared at his severed arm in a daze, then at the sword in Ling Han's hand, his face filled with disbelief. Damn. Chapter 2305. What was the Rainstorm Sword Hero's cultivation level? 8 lotuses, 1 leaf, he had cultivated to perfection in the severing mundane tier, and had a fortuitous encounter when he was dividing his soul. He had once eaten a celestial fruit, which was born from the blood essence of an 18-lotus ancestral king that was absorbed by a celestial medicine. Its effects were astounding, and it helped him form a 5th divided soul. Thus, his battle prowess was much stronger than other monarch tiers of the same level, and it was also the most important reason he could survive under the hands of that holy deer. However, Ling Han cut off one of his arms with a single strike. Indeed, this sword was sharp enough to render his protective abilities useless. However, the most important thing was that Ling Han's battle prowess had increased by who knew how many times compared to before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known that Ling Han possessed an ancestral tool. He wasn't an idiot, and he had already known that Ling Han possessed an ancestral tool. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "After being bullied by you once, it's my turn to retaliate." The rainstorm sword hero felt his scalp go numb. Only a few days had passed, and although the underground river had accelerated the flow of time, which was equivalent to a time cultivation room, it could only affect the spirit, and there was almost no change to the physical body. This allowed a person with 6 lotuses and 5 leaves to become so strong. "You're not 6 lotuses," he finally exclaimed. Ling Han smiled faintly. He cultivated the heaven-deceiving technique, and wanted others to think that he was whatever cultivation level he was. As long as he did not actively reveal the lotus on his forehead, who would know what cultivation level he was? He had no intention of satisfying the others' curiosity, and merely shook the divine demon sword, his killing intent soaring. The rainstorm sword hero trembled all over. He had a premonition that something bad was about to happen. "You severed your cultivation and recultivated, right?" He definitely did not believe that Ling Han was now 6 lotuses, but 7 lotuses, 9 leaves, or 8 lotuses. Otherwise, it was impossible for a mere 6 lotuses to sever an 8 lotus arm with a single strike. And if he severed his cultivation and recultivated, there was naturally no need to go to some mystery realm. Breaking through quickly under the acceleration of the flow of time was barely explainable. "At least you're not completely stupid." Ling Han smiled as he charged forward. His divine demon sword radiated with a cold light, illuminating this eerie and dark region. The rainstorm swordsman clenched his teeth and turned around to leave. He no longer dared to fight against Ling Han. His severed arm was in excruciating pain, and there was a terrifying force grinding against his wound, preventing it from healing. Otherwise, it would be a piece of cake for an 8 lotus cultivator to regrow an arm. Ling Han opened the void spirit space and chased after the rainstorm swordsman. Wung, 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 his body transformed into thousands of figures, appearing everywhere. As his cultivation soared, his mastery of the void spirit space had also greatly improved. Moreover, this was the result of learning from the strong points of the 2 realms to make up for his weak points. It was far better than when he was in the 9 divided soul stage in the immortal region. Ling Han released a battle cry, and his divine demon sword slashed through the air in a domineering manner. The rainstorm swordsman did not dare to face the edge of it at all. That was an ancestral weapon. Even if it only had the sharpness of an ancestral weapon, it was still incomparably frightening. Any random sword chi could cut his skin and tear his flesh open. He did everything he could to escape. The Rainstorm clan still had elites on the level of 9 Lotus, so he would let them deal with Ling Han. Right now, he only wanted to escape from here. "If I still let you escape, I'll write my name backwards," Ling Han said darkly. His killing intent was already boiling. His opponent was an evil demon and was extremely cruel. It reminded him of his celestial realm compatriots who had died tragically in the 2-realm battlefield, as well as the heavenly lord of original birth who had sacrificed himself to break the stability of the 2-realm connection point. His killing intent was endless. Ling Han attacked mercilessly, swearing to kill this evil demon. The Rainstorm swordsman was in despair. He was struck a few more times, and though he managed to suppress his injuries, he discovered that he was really not far from death. He was only holding on by relying on the blood essence of an 8 Lotus elite. Once his blood essence was exhausted, he would die instantly. He glared at Ling Han angrily, his resentment gathering endlessly. With a sudden roar, he pounced towards Ling Han, bursting forth with his strongest attack. Unfortunately, he had already used up his trump card. Otherwise, he would still be qualified to fight against Ling Han. A head flew into the air. The Rainstorm swordsman's headless body staggered, his life force immediately disappearing. Then, with a thud, he fell to the ground. Gulyalu, his head just so happened to roll in front of Ling Han. His eyes were still wide open, filled with indignation. Who would believe that an 8 Lotus monarch would actually die in the hands of a mere 6 Lotus? Fairy Yun He and the others were filled with awe and veneration. Ling Han's strength caused them to feel an indescribable fear and reverence. At first, they had thought that people like Yu Yuan, Wu Ya, and the others would be able to easily suppress Ling Han when they returned, but now, they no longer thought so. Ling Han deftly searched the Rainstorm Swordsman's spatial divine tool. Naturally, he would not share this with others. Not bad, the wealth of an 8 Lotus elite was still very shocking. He smiled slightly and said, "Let's go." Everyone walked numbly. At this time, even if Ling Han had broken through to 8 Lotus 11 leaves, they would not be surprised. Perhaps Ling Han was an ancestral king who had severed his cultivation and recultivated? After walking for a while, an uninvited guest came again. This time, it naturally could not be a member of the Rainstorm clan, but a battle weapon. However, it was about 3 meters tall and seemed to be forged from silver. Its whole body exuded a silver glow and was very eye-catching in this cave. The moment it appeared, its eyes shot out a red light that swept towards Ling Han and the others. This light was filled with destructive power, and when it hit the stone pillar that was hanging down in the cavern, the stone pillar was immediately severed, and with a purr, it fell down. Everyone hurriedly dodged and fled. Though it was not necessarily powerful, this battle weapon was indeed many times stronger than the golden battle weapon from before. It should have reached 8 Lotus tier, and this light couldn't be resisted at all. Otherwise, one's hand would definitely be severed upon contact. Ling Han was shocked. He couldn't figure out what this red light was. The destruction of pure power was limited. The foundation of the heaven and earth was regulations, and only by borrowing the power of regulations could one unleash powerful battle prowess. However, he did not sense any fluctuation of regulations in the red light. However, this was only pure power. Even celestial kings could only match a severing mundane tier with complete battle prowess, so how could it threaten Hunyo and the others? The Shen'enai plane was indeed a plane that was slightly higher than the foreign realm. It was filled with all sorts of strange things. Ling Han brandished his sword and charged out. The silver battle weapon's reaction was extremely fast, and another 2 flashes of red light shot over. Ling Han hurriedly waved the divine demon sword to block. The red light shot onto the divine demon sword, and a great force surged over, wanting to force Ling Han back. Heng! Ling Han stomped his foot, and one of his feet had already stepped deeply into the ground, instantly stopping his retreat. Divine light flashed in his eyes, and his other foot firmly stepped forward. The silver battle weapon's body leaned back slightly, as if the red light was a solid object. When Ling Han forced a step forward, it was about to retreat a little. So hot. The red light shot onto the divine demon sword, exuding a terrifyingly high temperature. Though it wasn't enough to melt the divine demon sword, it caused a chill to rise up in Ling Han. He definitely didn't want to be touched by this red light, or even with his physique, he might not be able to bear it. At least not now. When he improved his attainments in the indestructible heaven scroll, it would truly have to match his cultivation level. Chapter 2306. Ling Han walked forward step by step. Though his pace was not fast, it was incredibly stable. After more than 30 steps, he was less than 3 meters away from the silver battle weapon. Hong! The silver battle weapon opened its mouth, and suddenly spat out a ball of blazing fire. From the outside, it didn't have a mouth at all, and this mouth was also very strange. It didn't open its mouth like a living creature, but the metal near its mouth all retreated, and a dark hole appeared. This flame was blazing white, but incredibly terrifying. It had just been spat out, and the ground was burned red as if it was about to turn into magma. Ling Han's figure leaped, and used the divine demon sword to forcibly split the flames. He had already arrived above the silver battle weapon, and probed it with his divine sense. He didn't dare before, afraid of being injured by the flames and red light. After all, compared to the physical body, the spirit was still very weak. His divine sense touched the silver battle weapon, but was actually bounced back. It wasn't like before, where once his divine sense touched, the battle weapon or armor would immediately self-destruct. This battle weapon might not be weaker than him, and might be able to match him for a long time, so it temporarily refused to self-destruct, and still wanted to fight. Ling Han swung his sword, and the divine demon sword rippled with endless cold light. With a pu, the silver battle weapon was cut in half from top to bottom like it was made of mud. Shio shio shio. The red light in its eyes was still sweeping around, but it was unstable, intermittent. Finally, the silver glow all over its body dimmed, and there was no more movement. Completely destroyed. Ling Han frowned slightly. This was only an 8 Lotus level battle weapon, and if it was an Ancestral King level battle weapon, even the 18 Lotus Ancestral Kings would feel numb if a large group of them surged onto the battlefield. No wonder the foreign realm was suppressed by the Xian Ni plane even though it was so strong. They indeed had their own way. Ling Han suddenly thought that it was necessary to go to the Xian Ni plane. No, not just the Xian Ni plane, but the wider origin world. The planar war was the main melody of the Yuan world. One side of the Xian Ni plane was attacking the other side, while the other side was defending against the invasion of a stronger plane. Everyone was like this. Even if it was a top-notch plane, it wouldn't be peaceful. They wanted to devour each other and become the strongest in the Yuan world. In any case, he couldn't go back now. The neutral zone had been destroyed, and the energy storm would last for tens of billions of years. He might as well take this opportunity to explore the various planes. Since there were even higher planes, why did they have to stay in the other side? Ling Han's heart thumped with excitement. He had only perfected the regulations in the foreign realm, and his battle prowess at the same cultivation level had become even stronger. Then, if he could comprehend all the regulations of the entire origin world, just how strong would he be? A 9th firmament immortal king could match a heavenly venerable. Is there such a possibility? Ling Han didn't know that one was still within the framework of the rules, while the other was outside the rules, so they couldn't be compared. Initially, he was sure that celestial venerables were strong, but after seeing the Xian Ni plane's battle armors, he wasn't so sure anymore. These clearly didn't follow the natural laws, but their battle strength was shocking. The world was full of surprises. He tried hard to recall the battle with the silver battle armors, trying to decipher the secret of their strength, but he couldn't figure it out. Perhaps I can answer your doubts. A voice suddenly sounded. Everyone was shocked. This definitely wasn't said by any of them, but since when was there another person here? If he suddenly attacked, who could avoid it? Ling Han was also shocked. Like everyone else, he didn't know where the voice came from. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice and saw a person standing on the side of a stone pillar. He wasn't a demon, nor was he an angel. He had no horns, no tail, no wings, no halo. He was just an ordinary person. Ling Han was even more surprised. He almost thought that this was a person from the immortal realm. But definitely not. This person didn't have a shred of humanity. To be more specific, he didn't have any signs of life. If he didn't speak, he was no different from a dead person. It was no wonder that no one had discovered his existence. Let me introduce myself. My serial number is Enid001, but I don't like this name. I prefer you to call me Wally, the person said. His tone was incomparably calm, without the slightest cadence. Everyone was puzzled. It was understandable that he gave himself a name, but what did serial numbers mean? Were you not born, but created? You're from the Xian Ni plane. Fairy Yun, he shouted. Although she hadn't been to the two-realm battlefield, she knew many things about the Xian Ni plane. The cultivators of that plane weren't much different from the people of the immortal realm. Moreover, some high-level battle armors were full of spirituality, almost the same as living beings, and even many times better in some aspects. Wally's expression was calm. This female creature is right. I'm from the Xian Ni plane, he said calmly. He didn't care that Fairy Yun He's pretty face had already turned bright red. He sniffed. I can smell the sex hormones emitted by this female creature. She really wants to mate with you. The last sentence was directed at Ling Han. Fairy Yun He instantly gritted her teeth. Her beautiful hair shot up into the sky and danced angrily. She was about to go crazy. He actually made her sound like a lowly dog. What made her want to vomit blood was that this guy's nose was so good that he could actually smell it. Die. She jumped out crazily and charged at Wally. Wally stretched out his hand and pressed forward. Wang, a screen of light appeared and turned into a shield. Peng, Fairy Yun He's attack landed on the shield, but it was unable to break through. Fairy Yun He attacked crazily. She circled behind Wally and avoided his shield. She wanted to use this gap to launch an attack. Wally didn't even turn around. Instead, the screen of light flashed and the shield turned into a ball of light, protecting him within. Pung pung pung. Countless attacks bombarded him, but Wally acted as if he didn't see them. His dead face didn't change at all. Ling Han felt that this was very interesting and said, "You're not a living being?" "Not really," Wally said calmly. "A part of my body is made up of powerful biological genes. This completes my neural network, and my self-healing ability is also greatly improved. However, at the same time, it also fused with a lot of superstring materials, which allows my body to become a killing weapon. If we look at it from the perspective of traditional ecology, I'm indeed not a living being. However, I also possess biological activity, the ability to evolve and think, so I can be considered a living being." After he explained like this, everyone felt a little confused. As expected of something from another plane. Just thinking about it gave them a headache. "You have no intention of becoming enemies with us?" Ling Han asked again. Wally nodded and said, "I was originally created to calculate, but at the same time, I was also created to assist my master. However, my master is already dead, and I've been buried here for 35 eras, 8,436,335,608,334 years, 232 days, 17 hours, 33 minutes, and 17 seconds later, the power of heaven and earth has affected my body. The device that binds my neural network has already lost its effect. Now, I have the ability to think independently. I believe that war is a meaningless and unnecessary act of consumption." Chapter 2308. "Be more specific, we don't understand," Ling Han said. Wally's patience was absolutely astonishing. He explained, "Vitality Index is the comprehensive index of a living being's strength, including life force, battle prowess, and so on. Every 1,000 points is a level." He paused and continued, "A vitality index of 2,584 is equivalent to the battle prowess of a 7 lotus 5-leaf cultivator here." When he said this, everyone understood. This was the division of battle prowess in the Xian Ni plane. Then what about evolution index? Wally continued, "Evolution index represents the potential to increase one's level of existence. The higher the value, the higher one can reach a higher level of existence. Then is the value of 8 high or low?" Bewitching Maiden Row asked. After all, it had been a value of more than 2,000 before, and now it had suddenly dropped to 8, making her very nervous. Wally continued, "The lowest value of evolution index is 0, which means there is absolutely no possibility of increasing, and the highest value is 12, which means there is hope of reaching the highest level of existence. In that case, though 8 wasn't high, it wasn't low either." "Then what about Nyo?" Hunyo jumped out. She was also very curious. Wally's eyes shone with green light again, and swept his gaze over Hunyo's body. After a while, he said, "Vitality Index is 2,652, Evolution Index is 9, but there is a variable that could reach 10. Ling Han was stunned. Hunyo's potential was definitely stronger than Bewitching Maiden Rose, this was certain, and the variable that Wally spoke of should be the Celestial King's brand in her body, which would help Hunyo rush to a higher level. This guy was really impressive. With just a sweep of his eyes, he was able to see through other people's secrets. Wally turned his gaze to the Empress, and once again shone with green light. "Vitality Index is 2,650, Evolution Index is 9, he said. There was almost no difference in battle prowess between the Empress and Hunyo, and their potential was also the same. However, because Hunyo had an additional Celestial King's brand, there was a possibility that she could rush to a higher level. What about me? What about me?" More people surged over. They were all very curious about what level they were at. "Vitality Index is 1682, Evolution Index is 8. Vitality Index is 1357, Evolution Index is 7. Life Index. The Severing Mundane Tier, or in other words, 6 lotuses, Most had a vitality index of slightly more than 1,000, but even Fairy Yun-hee, who was a 5th Severance Monarch tier, only had a vitality index of slightly more than 2,000. If it was a 4th Severance, it would only have a vitality index of 1,600 at most. In terms of evolution index, Emperors were 7 and Emperors were 8. Because it was impossible for an Emperor star to appear in the Severing Mundane tier, there was no evolution index of 9. Don't worry. Wally continued, the evolution index is just a reference. It's not absolute. Moreover, the life potential will also change, which will affect the evolution index. Look at her and her. Actually, their evolution indexes are very close to 10, and they are just a little bit away. It's not impossible for them to cross over, he said, pointing at Hun-yo and the Empress. Ling Han nodded. The two women's battle prowess was actually similar to Emperor stars of the same level. If there was an Emperor star of this level, it was just that if they did not form the divided soul, they would still be lacking. What about Na-ba? Everyone was curious. That fellow was simply too ferocious. Just how high was his vitality and evolution index? Wally swept his gaze over Ling Han, and after a while, said, Vitality Index, 3,396, Evolution Index, 10. Gasp. Everyone drew in a sharp breath. 7 lotuses already had a vitality index of over 3,000. Based on the previous numbers, 3,000 should be 8 lotuses, and normally, 100 corresponded to battle prowess of 1 leaf. Then, Ling Han's true battle prowess should be 8 lotuses with 3 leaves. Moreover, his evolution index was 10. This was too shocking, indicating that Ling Han indeed had the potential of an Emperor star. However, Ling Han frowned slightly and said, You said that the upper limit of the evolution index is 12? Wally nodded and said, At present, the strongest being discovered has an evolution index of 12, but we can't say for sure that there are no beings above 12. He was still very cautious. Everyone was speechless. For a freak like Ling Han, his evolution index was actually not at the top level? Then he must be a prodigy from the Shen-ni plane, or even from a stronger plane. The strength of one's potential would definitely be affected by the environment. Your evolution index should be 10. 9. However, even if you're short of 0. 1, it's still only 10, Wally said. Everyone sighed in relief. If a freak like Ling Han only had an evolution index of 10, then what kind of monster would it be if it had an evolution index of 12? It was completely unimaginable. Ling Han's heart ached slightly. He was already so powerful, but his potential had not reached 11. However, when he thought about it, his battle prowess had increased tremendously just by comprehending the rules of 2 realms. How powerful would he be if he integrated the rules of the 3 realms, 10 realms, and 100 realms? A monster with an evolution index of 11 or even 12 should be like that. With this thought, Ling Han was no longer indignant. Instead, he was filled with fighting spirit. Follow me. Wally continued to walk forward. The crowd's emotions did not bother him in the slightest. The others followed him. With Wally's light guiding them, their speed naturally increased. In just over 4 hours, the ceiling of the cave was getting higher and higher. It seemed to be boundless. The way out is just ahead, Wally said as he pointed ahead. Wally pointed to the front. There was a pillar of light that shot into the sky. Complicated runes could be seen flashing on it. Ling Han suddenly attacked. Pa Fairy Yun-hee and the others were immediately knocked unconscious. Why? Wally asked Ling Han, but his tone was calm. It was as if he would not ask if Ling Han did not tell him why. Ling Han said, Your identity cannot be known by anyone. Therefore, these people's memories must be erased. Wally did not say anything. Instead, his eyes kept glowing. One was bright while the other was dark. After a while, he said, According to my calculations, the people of this realm hate me very much. If my identity is exposed, the probability of me dying is 999,996%. Ling Han did not know how he calculated this probability, but it was good that the other party knew. He was a little worried about how to erase Fairy Yunhee and the others' memories of Wally's identity. He did not want to kill these people for the time being. That's why you disguised yourselves like this. Wally looked at Ling Han and the others. Ling Han felt strange and said, "How did you find out our true identities?" They had all learned the heaven-deceiving technique. Even if the ancestral king was not careful, he would not be able to discover anything wrong with them. Wally said calmly, "This is the conclusion I came up with through rigorous calculations. The reliability is 93.58%. As he said this, his body actually changed. 2 horns grew out of his head, 2 bat wings grew out of his back, and a tail grew out of his thigh. His skin was no longer glowing. Instead, it was glowing red. He was completely a demon now. Ling Han shook his head. This kind of disguise is not very useful. Judging a person's identity, appearance was secondary. Aura was the most important. Wally tilted his head and said, "I can perfectly imitate any living creature. However, this will consume my virtual energy. I cannot waste it if it is not necessary." "All right." Ling Han said this in his heart. Then he asked, "Is there an ancestral king's corpse here?" Chapter 2309. Ancestral King. Wally was startled at first, then his eyes flashed as if he was calculating something. Then he said, "I understand now, you're talking about existences with life indexes over 5,000. Yes, there are 2 corpses of such creatures here, and their life indexes even reached more than 13,000 when they were at their peak. They are also the 18 Lotus ancestral kings of this plane," he said again. Ling Han was startled and said, "Why are there 2? 35 eras ago, I followed a king to carry out a secret plan and was discovered by one of the ancestral kings here. The 2 of us had a great battle and both of us fell here." Wally described a major event that happened in ancient times. "When I designed it, it was only for data analysis and calculation. It didn't have any combat capabilities. Most of my limbs were destroyed by the shockwaves of the battle, but they recovered after a long time. But I have a strong learning ability. Inspired by this battle, I also have a certain level of combat ability." Ling Han was curious and asked, "What's your life index?" Wally's eyes flashed a few times and said, "This may threaten my life. It's a top secret. I can't reveal it." Ling Han asked again, "Then what's the plan you're going to carry out?" "The memory crystal was severely damaged in the battle. It can't be reconstructed." This time, Wally didn't say that he couldn't reveal it, he just said that he didn't know. Ling Han decided not to dwell on these small details, and said, "Can you bring me to the 2 ancestral kings' corpses? If you can help me collect them, that would be even better." Wally immediately shook his head. "I won't help you do anything without an item of equivalent value to exchange." Ling Han snickered and said, "You're eyeing my sword again? If you give me that sword..." Wally's eyes flickered for a while. "I can bring you to the remains and help you get a corpse." Only then could he exchange for a corpse? Thinking about it, it made sense. The remains of a 9th heaven immortal king were extremely rare. Immortal kings were not afraid of the immortals' tribulation. In theory, their lifespans were unlimited, and 9th heaven immortal kings were practically invincible. How could they possibly die under normal circumstances? It could be said that the number of 9th firmament immortal kings was definitely fewer than immortal gold. In that case, the number of 9th firmament immortal kings that died was naturally even fewer. However, he would have to trade the divine demon sword for it. Ling Han was reluctant, so he settled for the next best thing. "What if you only bring me to the 2 sets of human remains?" 1/10,000th of the sword's body, Vale said seriously. Ling Han couldn't help but grimace. Could it be that he had to break off a piece of his divine demon sword and give it to him? "Don't tell me you only want that sword?" He decided to fight for it. "I have many other good things with me. You can have them." He took out celestial medicine, godly metal, and the like from the Black Tower, but Wally was disdainful. However, when Ling Han took out that celestial king tier ring, this guy nodded and said, "This can help you exchange for half of the corpse of an ancestral king." Fuck, there was still half of it? Ling Han did not give up and took out many more things. However, Hua Li's standards were really high. Aside from immortal gold, he was disdainful even of celestial medicine. It was not that those things had no value, but rather that they were useless to him. You don't eat celestial medicine? Hua Li shook his head. I am formed from superstring material, and need factors that are close to the source power of the world to increase the strength of my physique. These condensed substances of regulations are of no benefit to me. The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched again. Superstring material, factors, condensed substances of regulations, what kind of things were these? Could he speak like a human? A thought flashed in his mind, and he took out a scroll that he could not open and asked, "How about this?" Hua Li walked over, and 2 rays of green light shot out, continuously scanning over the scroll. Then his whole body released a light, sometimes blazing and sometimes dim. The changes were intense, as if his emotions were greatly fluctuating. "Give me this, and I can help you obtain those 2 corpses of the ancestral kings," he said. His voice was still as calm as ever, but his glowing eyes betrayed him. He wanted. Ling Han was astonished. He knew that these 2 scrolls were definitely extraordinary because they could not be stored in the Black Tower, and even the divine demon sword could not damage them, but Hua Li was actually willing to help him move the remains of the 2 celestial kings over. What did this mean? The importance of the scroll was far greater than that of the divine demon sword. Is so exaggerated. Ling Han did not have the slightest doubt in Hua Li. This guy would not lie at all. He believed in equivalent exchange and would definitely not let others take advantage of him. However, Ling Han did not want others to take advantage of him either, so he said, "You cannot just bring the corpses of the ancestral kings over, but also let the 2 of them refine them." He pointed at the Empress and Hunyeo. Hua Li's eyes flickered between light and dark, as if he was undergoing an intense mental struggle, but Ling Han knew that this was him calculating again. After a while, Hua Li nodded and said, "Sure." Ling Han gave an "oh" internally. He had still underestimated the importance of this scroll. One had to know that moving the corpses of the ancestral kings over and allowing the Empress and Hunyeo to refine them were 2 completely different things. The difficulty was not on the same level. What exactly is this scroll? Ling Han could not help but ask the question in his heart. Hua Li did not hide it and said, "This is the condensation of the most fundamental power in the origin world, and can help me evolve to a higher level." "Then what about us?" The Empress interrupted. "You guys cannot absorb it now." Hua Li shook his head. "Then when exactly do we need to absorb it?" Bewitching Maiden Ro continued to ask. "Life index must reach 15,000 and above," Hua Li said. "In other words, the so-called pseudo-heavenly venerable tier." Fuck, only a pseudo-heavenly venerable tier could refine this thing? Ling Han felt that this was inconceivable. Then what was the meaning of the appearance of this thing? "There is a special fluctuation of life energy on it," Hua Li continued. "Specific people can open it, and do not need to wait for their life index to break through 15,000 points." Then it obviously could not possibly be them, because Ling Han, the Empress, and the others had all tried to open those 2 scrolls, but not a single one had succeeded. The so-called Heaven's Chosen One? "What's the use of opening it?" Ling Han asked. "There are too few known conditions, so I am unable to calculate and deduce," Hua Li said calmly. He didn't seem to be curious about anything. In fact, he didn't even urge Ling Han to give him the scroll. "Why can you refine it?" Ling Han asked a crucial question. Could it be that Hua Li's strength was strong enough to become a pseudo-heavenly venerable tier? "My life structure is different." Hua Li still had a lifeless look on his face. "A part of the material that I'm made of is condensed from the origin energy of heaven and earth. However, if I want to refine this thing, I'll need 169,847,332 years, 105 days, 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 22 seconds. Hunyeo could not help but be very interested. This person had always been so methodical when he spoke. In short, he could refine this scroll, but the time required was a little shockingly long, but considering the factor that only pseudo-heavenly venerables could open it, more than 100 million years was really not long. Chapter 23:10. Ling Han considered for a moment, and handed the scroll to Wall. Though this thing was precious, he couldn't use it at all, so keeping it on him would be a waste. It would be better to give it to the Empress and the others to increase their strength. Furthermore, he still had a scroll, so he wasn't afraid if it really came in handy. Wall took the scroll and stuffed it into his chest. His chest suddenly parted like liquid, revealing a space, and then wrapped the scroll inside. His chest fused back together, and he took the form of a demon again. Please wait a moment. He was courteous. Xiao, his figure flickered, and he ran off into the distance, quickly disappearing from sight. How long do I have to wait? Ling Han called out loudly. Though Wall had disappeared, his voice drifted over. According to my calculations, it will take 3 years, 5 days, 5 hours, 17 minutes, and 8 seconds. Sure enough, it was very Wall style, accurate down to the second. Ling Han had asked him before. Hours, minutes, and seconds were all the units of time in the Xian Ni world. It actually needed as long as 3 years? However, this guy lay down for as long as an epoch, so for him, 3 years was indeed a wait. Ling Han and the others were unwilling to waste time, and all entered the Black Tower to comprehend under the reincarnation tree. 3 years passed in a hurry, and Ling Han and the others exited the Black Tower. They saw Wall walk back from afar as if he was on the spot, and he was holding a corpse in each of his hands. One corpse was no different from a human, and the other was an angel, and it was a woman, indescribably beautiful. Though they were corpses, and their bodies were covered with wounds, they looked like 2 exquisite works of art, and didn't give off the slightest feeling of frightening. I adjusted the flow of regulations in these 2 objects so that they would no longer be harmful to humans, Wall said calmly as he put down the corpse. In his eyes, these 2 corpses were only objects. Ling Han nodded, and said to Hunyao and the Empress, whether they can become Emperor Stars or not will depend on the success of this move. Actually, refining a Celestial King's bone might not be able to become an Emperor Star, but it was the most likely path before them. The Empress and Hunyao both nodded, and each took a precious body of a Celestial King. The Empress chose the Angel tribe, while Hunyao chose the Celestial King of the Xian Ni plane. They began to extract the essence of the power within, but after 35 epochs, even if it was a 9th-layer immortal king, the power within the remains had almost been completely drained away. What was left was only the imprint of the laws within the remains. Moreover, Wall's actions made it possible for the split soul to refine the immortal king's corpse. Ling Han couldn't help but feel curious. How had the Rain Emperor managed to refine the remains of a 9th heaven celestial king in the past? This second brother's luck was truly heaven-defying. How long do they need? Ling Han asked Wally. According to my calculations, she would need 109 years, with an error of around 2 years. Meanwhile, she would need 120 years, with an error of around 3 years, Wally said, pointing at Hunyao and the Empress. In terms of talent and ability in martial art, Hunyao was still slightly superior. Ling Han nodded, and walked towards Bewitching Maiden Row. There is no need to comfort me. I understand. My potential has already been used up. Bewitching Maiden Row knew what Ling Han wanted to say. Ling Han smiled. After so many years together, even if he did not have love for Bewitching Maiden Row, he still had feelings for her. Of course, it was friendship, so he felt slightly guilty when Bewitching Maiden Row came empty-handed. He began to concoct alchemical pills. He had nothing better to do anyway. For example, Lu Yutong and the other women were all comprehending under the reincarnation tree while eating the alchemical pills that Ling Han had concocted. Their cultivation level advanced very quickly, and very soon, they all advanced into the second severance. In Ling Han's eyes, this was ridiculously slow, but in the outside world, being able to advance from the first severance to the second severance in a few thousand years was very impressive whether in the celestial realm or the foreign realm. It couldn't be helped. Who asked Ling Han's alchemy ability to be world-shaking? He was presently studying the alchemical pill system of the foreign realm and could already concoct 6 lotus-level alchemical pills. Otherwise, the women would not have advanced so easily. He believed that if he was given another few tens of thousands of years, he could return to the level of a 4-star alchemist. Wally, do you know the pill recipe? Ling Han suddenly turned his attention to Wally. Wally's eyes flickered slightly and then he said, "My memory crystal stores all the knowledge of this realm, but after I was injured, I lost a large portion of the information. However, the pill recipe was not lost. Can you give it to me?" Ling Han asked. "Yes, in exchange," Wally said very calmly. Ling Han pointed at him and said, "The things in your stomach need 100 to 200 million years to be digested, so can't you be more magnanimous and give me some small things or trinkets in this period of time? It's not like you'll suffer a great loss." Wally was still calm. He pursued an equivalent exchange and didn't mind taking some advantage, but don't even think about making him suffer a loss. Ling Han didn't want to use divine metal, divine demon sword, or another scroll that couldn't be opened to exchange, so he decided to temporarily give up. As long as he could enter the Xian and I plane, obtaining the pill recipe would be a piece of cake. On the other hand, if he couldn't enter, then what use was there for the pill recipe? The medicinal properties and regulations were too different, and he couldn't concoct it at all. He was also cultivating, and when 100 years passed, he almost reached the peak of the 9th dividing soul tier. He had completely perfected the regulations of the 2 realms, and was only a hair's breadth away from returning to the immortal palace tier. He could take this step at any time, but Ling Han wanted to perfect his foundation, so he wasn't in a hurry to take the step. After another few years, Hunyo was the first to complete as expected. She stood up, and Kwang, there were immediately dense thunderclouds and lightning. She was about to break through. "Damn heavenly tribulation, come, Nyo isn't afraid." The little girl shouted loudly and decisively rushed into the sky, taking the initiative to face the attack. A day later, she completed a qualitative leap, advancing into the 5th dividing soul tier, and headed towards the height of the Emperor Star. A few more years passed, and the Empress also successfully refined the precious bone of a 9th heaven celestial king. Kwang, similarly, lightning surged, and she was about to face the heavenly tribulation. A day later, she also successfully took the step that she hadn't taken before, and there was hope for the Emperor Star. She still couldn't be complacent, because there were many people who had cultivated the 5th, 6th, or 7th dividing soul tier, but failed at the last moment. Some had insufficient source power of heaven and earth, and some had limited potential, unable to continue. However, the 2 girls had refined the precious bone of a 9th heaven celestial king, so there was no need to worry about the problem of insufficient source power, and with regards to their talent in martial art, Ling Han naturally had absolute confidence in them. Before leaving, "What should we do with these people?" Bewitching Maiden Ro asked Ling Han. These people were referring to Fairy Yun He and the other students of the 100 Battle Academy. They had been continuously suppressed by Ling Han, and had yet to wake up. Ling Han said, "I want to erase their information about Wally, but I'm worried that if I use too much force, I'll erase too many memories." "I'll do it," Wally said. In these 100 years or so, he had been sitting silently at the side, and did not rush them, calm to the extreme. Thinking about it, it made sense. For someone who could lie in bed for a few dozen epochs, would he care about waiting for 100 or 200 years? "I won't charge you," Ling Han said with a smile. He knew that Wally was good at calculations and extremely accurate, but this guy had the problem of being greedy when he saw money. "I won't charge you," Wally said very seriously, as if he didn't realize that Ling Han was only teasing him. Chapter 23:12. You really think too highly of this Ba. The demon's face was full of disdain. How could he offend Serene Source? They're not even on the same level. Previously, he had been filled with righteous indignation, but now he was completely siding with Serene Source. It was clear how high Serene Source's status was among all the students. This kind of person had already transcended the boundaries of his race and was synonymous with strength. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. Maybe this Ba is so powerful that he can even beat up Serene Source. Nonsense. As soon as these words came out, not only did the demon immediately glare at him, but the dozen or so demons around him also turned their heads and cast him looks of disgust. Serene Source was a god of 100 Battle College, and no one could blaspheme him. What nonsense! They've never fought before, Ling Han said with a smile. These words naturally caused even more hatred. More people turned their heads, as if they wanted to use their gazes to cut Ling Han into 1,000 pieces. Ha! Someone suddenly froze, pointing at Ling Han. He's Ba. Everyone cried out in surprise. Fuck, after all this time, this was the culprit. Moreover, how could this person be so shameless, boasting about himself like this? Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "Those who believe that I can beat up Serene Source, please raise your hand." Of course, no one raised their hand. They all looked at him as if he were an idiot. "Ah!" an angel shouted. He directly charged over. Peng, peng, peng. No one could stop him. Holy light flashed, and he seemed like a god who was untainted by even a speck of dust. "Good son." Ling Han nodded. "Right, good son, what's your name? Dad doesn't remember you." The angel's face instantly turned green with anger. "You're definitely doing this on purpose. You named yourself Ba to deliberately take advantage of others." He snorted and said, "I'm Lu Yunshin." "Good thing you're only green in your heart, not your head," Ling Han said seriously. LV Yuanshin was already furious to begin with, and when he heard Ling Han's words, he became even more furious. He charged at Ling Han without any hesitation. No one from the fiend race helped him because Ling Han dared to blaspheme the Nether Source. This made everyone hate him. Ling Han's eyes flickered as he released a terrifying killing intent. LV Yuanshin's movements came to an abrupt halt, and fear flashed across his face. He had a feeling that if he didn't stop, he would be killed by Ling Han. How is that possible? He was an 8 Lotus 1 Leaf Emperor, and according to the information, Ling Han was only a 6 Lotus 5 Leaf Emperor. The difference between the two of them was like heaven and earth. Even if he closed his eyes and let Ling Han attack him, Ling Han would not be able to break through his defenses and harm a single hair on his body. Where did this feeling come from? Ling Han smiled again. "Good son, now you know that attacking your father is disgraceful, right? Kneel down and admit your mistake." LV Yuan Exen forcibly suppressed the fear in his heart. He believed that this was only because Ling Han had cultivated some kind of special cultivation technique that specialized in spiritual attacks. That was why he had the misconception that Ling Han was very powerful, and that he wasn't actually that powerful. Moreover, Ling Han had repeatedly called him son. If he didn't teach him a harsh lesson, he would definitely become a laughingstock in the future. "You're courting death." LV Yuanshin suddenly attacked. Boom! A terrifying power swept out, and his wings flapped, materializing 12 golden swords that stabbed at Ling Han. Each of the golden swords was filled with terrifying destructive power. "Son, you're attacking your father. You're rebelling." Ling Han shouted. He unfolded the void spirit space, but he didn't split himself. Instead, he dodged with great agility. Boom! One of the golden swords had been slashing at him, but he suddenly disappeared. The sword wasn't able to be pulled back in time, and it instantly stabbed into the leg of a person behind him. The person instantly screamed in agony as he looked at LV Yuanshin with a resentful gaze. Who had he offended to cause such a disaster? LV Yuanshin grimaced. He had already broken the rules of the academy by barging into the Angel District, and now he had even injured someone for no reason. He would definitely be punished in the future. However, now that things had come to this, he had no way out. He had to punish Ling Han severely. He controlled the remaining 11 golden swords and continued to chase after Ling Han. Ling Han used the same trick again. When the golden swords closed in, he unfolded the void spirit space again and disappeared. Shio shio shio. The golden swords flashed wildly, causing the faces of the surrounding demons to darken. It would be extremely unlucky for them to be stabbed by one of the swords. Fortunately, LV Yuanshin was prepared this time. He pulled back his swords in time, and no innocent people were harmed. He humphed and waved his hand. The 11 golden swords continued to chase after Ling Han. "I won't fall for it anymore." Ling Han snickered inwardly. Was it really that easy? When the golden swords attacked him, he dodged with the void spirit space while flicking his fingers slightly. Instantly, one of the golden swords deviated from its path and shot toward a member of the demon race. Pooh! No one had expected this attack, and the member of the demon race was not very powerful, so he was instantly hit. Coincidentally, he was the one who had taken the blow for Ling Han. Ah! He screamed, tears almost flowing out of his eyes. Firstly, he was in pain, and secondly, he felt wronged. It was said that swords had no eyes, but both times they had struck his body. This sword clearly had eyes, and it was extremely accurate. He looked at LV Yuanxin with resentment. You have a grudge against me, don't you? LV Yuanxin couldn't express the bitterness in his heart. He had clearly attacked Ling Han. It was definitely Ling Han's flicking that had caused one of the golden swords to go out of control and accidentally injure someone else. Fortunately, this still meant that Ling Han was not powerful enough. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to dodge, and there wouldn't have been only one golden sword that had been knocked away. He mustered his remaining courage and continued to use the 10 golden swords to chase after Ling Han. You guys are too short-sighted. Ling Han laughed as he dodged. You guys think that Serene Source is invincible? What a joke. If he really was invincible, he wouldn't have only brought 72 to the academy. How dare you? LV Yuanxin was furious. This guy actually dared to insult Serene Source? He was practically seeking death. He roared angrily, and the 10 golden swords instantly sped up. This was a unique technique of his sect, and he had activated his maximum power. However, the price was 10 times the consumption of his soul power. This time, Ling Han didn't use the void spirit space. Instead, he leaped forward with great explosive power, dodging all 10 golden swords. This time, LV Yuanxin couldn't stop himself. Pew, 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 pew. The 10 golden swords all shot into the demon behind Ling Han. Ling Han had definitely done this on purpose. This demon was the one who had been hit twice in a row. His entire body was covered in swords. Although he was formed from natural laws, he would take on a physical form for a short period of time. The power of natural laws wouldn't dissipate until it was exhausted. He looked at LV Yuanxin and then at Ling Han. He spat out the word fuck. Then, his head twisted to the side, and he collapsed to the ground, fainting. His eyes were filled with grievance and grief. Why did you have to shoot me? And why do you always have to stand in front of me, causing me to take the hit for you? Damn it. LV Yuanxin was furious to the extreme. He suddenly charged at Ling Han. He was really going to become a laughingstock. All 12 of his attacks had actually accidentally hit someone else. Ling Han smiled and reached out with his right hand. He only used his index finger as a sword. As he flicked it slightly, sword chi swept out with astonishing power. Chapter 23:13. A Beautiful Romance. Ling Han used the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords, activating it with the foreign realm's regulations of slaughter. Sword chi rampaged, and the power of regulations surged. The area suddenly became extremely dangerous, and the people nearby all retreated to avoid being caught in the crossfire. One had to know that the person from before was a good example. Oh no! Everyone rushed towards that unlucky fellow. Because he had fainted, it was naturally impossible for him to leave. Now that he had been affected by the battle, his clothes had already been torn to shreds, revealing a bright red buttocks. One could see that his tail was drooping, and it just happened to hang in the crotch, covering the last bit of his body. Everyone looked at each other, feeling that this guy was really ruined. It was already a huge joke to be hit 12 times by mistake, and now his butt was exposed in public. Did he still have the face to stay here? LV Yuanxin's eyes were already bloodshot, and he didn't care about anything else. He activated his ultimate move and blasted at Ling Han. He drew out a sword of light, and its power was extremely terrifying. The light that shot out was also extremely disgusting to the demons. It was filled with the power of light, and they instinctively loathed it. Ling Han, however, was calm and unafraid. Recently, he had been recultivating the indestructible Heaven Scroll. With the help of the magic cube of origin, he had a deeper understanding of regulations, and even the power of heaven and earth above regulations. He had improved his physique by another level. However, at this stage, improving one's physique could no longer rely on comprehension. It was too slow. Instead, he had to consume all kinds of natural treasures, and even fuse divine metal into his body, turning himself into a human-shaped weapon. Ling Han was still a long way from fusing with divine metal, but the resources he needed were still very shocking. The academy had given him some, but it was far from enough to meet his needs. However, his current physique was more than enough to deal with LV Yuanxin. The battle between the two was extremely intense. The spectating demons were getting more and more shocked. Although Ling Han didn't have the absolute upper hand, didn't they say that he only had a 6 Lotus 5-leaf cultivation level? How could he be so strong? Ling Han's battle prowess was fully unleashed. 7 Lotus 9 leaves appeared on his forehead, and his cultivation level was obvious at a glance. This is an imperial star. Everyone felt their scalps go numb. It had to be known that even in a plane like the Outlander realm, there were very few Emperor stars. 100 Battle College only had one, and that was Serene Source. Why did Nether Source have such a high status? Winning glory for the Academy was one reason, but it was also because of his status as the Emperor Star, which made people revere him. This was an existence destined to become one of the 18 Lotus Ancestral Kings as long as he didn't fall. Who wouldn't look up to him? No wonder this person was so confident and did not even place serene origin in his eyes. As an Emperor Star, he should indeed be this domineering. After discovering this, the attitudes of many evil demons immediately changed 180 degrees, from the previous disdain to fanaticism. They have an Emperor Star too. Although they respected Serene Source, that was for the sake of the big picture. After all, everyone was from the same academy. But if they could, wouldn't they wish that Serene Source was from the demon race? Of course, it was impossible for Serene Origin to become a member of the Fiend clan, but now that a tyrant had appeared, they were naturally elated. Who said the Fiend clan didn't have super geniuses? Weia and Sun Feng walked over. One of them was an 8 Lotus 7-leaf cultivator, and the other was an 8 Lotus 8-leaf cultivator. Their strength could be ranked in the top 10 of the academy. There were less than 3 people in the Fiend district who could stop them. At most, there were 2. The problem was, the 2 strongest people in the Fiend district were not here. One had gone out to train, and the other was breaking through somewhere. Where would they go to find them in such a short time? Tyrant, you're too arrogant, Weia said indifferently, but his voice carried a terrifying pressure. It was as if he was an emperor scolding his subjects. If the monarch wanted his subjects to die, the subjects had no choice but to die. It was as vast as the sea. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Without a father like this, I wouldn't have been able to give birth to a son as arrogant as you." Immediately, many of the Fiend clan members laughed out loud. This guy's name was definitely Tyrant on purpose. He would always take advantage of anyone who called him out. Weia's expression was very dark. He snorted and said, "Cut the crap. So what if you're the Emperor's star? You can't even withstand a single blow from me." He paused for a moment, then said, "Today, I'm here to warn you to stay away from the Star Maiden and the others. They're not people an ugly and vulgar person like you can covet." After hearing his words, the crowd finally realized that they were looking for Ling Han because of women. As expected, even heroes couldn't escape the barrier of beauty. Ling Han shook his head. "This is not up to you to talk." "Then you're asking for trouble." Weia stretched out his hand and grabbed at Ling Han. "Weia, you're going too far," one of the Fiend District experts said unhappily. He stretched out a huge hand and blocked Weia's attack. However, his strength was clearly inferior to his opponent's. Even though he managed to block the attack, his body trembled uncontrollably. He retreated at least 100 feet before he stopped. 2 rows of clear footprints were left on the ground. You dare stop me?" Weia said coldly, his gaze dark. "You came to our Fiend District and still dare to act so violently? Do you think there's no one in our Fiend District?" said the Fiend race expert, Muhi. Weia's group of 3 had charged in. If they still allowed them to swagger their way out, then where would the Fiend race's face be? Of course, if Ling Han wasn't the Emperor Star, he wouldn't have protected him so desperately. After all, Wu Ya and Sun Feng were both top-tier elites in the Angel Zone, and if he wanted to stop them from committing murder, he would have to pay a huge price. So what if you all attack together? Are you a match for me and Sun Feng? Said Wu Ya indifferently. Mu Tai was speechless. The other party was right. The difference in strength was too great. A 7 Lotus Cultivator was no match for Boundless and Sun Feng. Only an 8 Lotus Cultivator could match them, but how many 8 Lotus Cultivators were there? The 8 Lotus experts who could stay in the academy were all emperors. Each academy had at most 10, and on average there were only 2 or 3 in each district. There were 3 in the Fiend district. The 2 strongest had already left, so he was the strongest. If it was just Wu Ya or Sun Feng, he was confident he could stop them. After all, this was the academy. No matter how arrogant Wu Ya was, he wouldn't dare to act recklessly. But if there were 2 of them, he didn't think he could stop them. He snorted. Do you think our fiend race has no backbone? Do you think this is a place where you can do whatever you want? Wu Ya laughed loudly. If I told you that this brat actually had designs on Nether Yuan's woman, would you still dare to protect him? What? Everyone was shocked. This tyrant was too daring. He actually dared to covet Nether Yuan's woman? And his taste was too heavy. He even dared to lay his hands on a woman from the Angel District. Ling Han was speechless. This was too good at distorting the truth. It was clearly Nether Yuan who had designs on Ling Han's woman, but Wu Ya had turned the tables on Ling Han. Whoever dares to attack again will be making an enemy out of Nether Yuan. Wu Ya sneered and brazenly grabbed at Ling Han. Reading on a mobile phone, you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.